Okay, I'd like to call our meeting to order here, 7 o'clock. I want to thank everyone for coming out tonight. In attendance, we have Alan, Ginny, Shari, Nancy, Dick, Milton, Andy, and Janet is on the phone, and Greg and Chow are also going to be calling in. For staff, we have Susan and Sherry. Okay, this meeting is being streamed, so I would ask you just remember you're live.
Thank God.
And one of the things I remind the board member and Susan and Sherry, when you're talking, please lean forward and speak in the microphones. That's important.
Good point, yes, sir.
Okay, civility principles. Speak kindly, don't speak ill. Accept and give constructive criticism. Apologize earnestly. Respect others' opinions. Respect other people's time. And for those of you who are calling in, I just remind, please put your phone on mute when you're not speaking. And also, don't try to watch the live stream and participate in the meeting at the same time. It doesn't work. There's a time delay and produces interesting results. Okay, announcement of closed special meetings. So there was a closed meeting of the Audit Committee on July 23rd, 2018. James Young, Dick Bolton, Greg Swin, Ginny Thomas. The vote to close was 4-0. Meeting was closed under section 1 and 4, discussion of matters pertaining to employees and personnel, and consultation with staff personnel, consultants, attorneys, board members, or other persons in connection with pending or potential litigation or other legal matters. Purpose was Clifton Larson and Allen's review of internal controls and other communication with external and internal auditors. The meeting was closed at 8:45 p.m. and opened at 9:30 p.m. There was a closed meeting of the CA Board of Directors on July 26, 2018. It was approved at our June meeting. The reason to close was sections 4 and 6, consultation with staff personnel, consultants, attorneys, board members, and other persons in connection with pending or potential litigation or other legal matters, in consideration of the terms or conditions of a business transaction in the negotiation stage, if the disclosure could adversely affect the economic interests of the homeowners association. It was a discussion of legal matters and a contract issue. Meeting was closed at 11:15 and opened at 12:30 the next day.
Your CA board at work.
Yeah. There was a closed meeting of the Architectural Resource Committee on Monday, August 13, 2018. We had Sherry, Deb Bach, Tom Mungo, Gracie Bradford in attendance. The vote to close was 3-0. It was closed under Section 4, consultation with staff personnel, consultants, attorneys, or other persons in connection with pending or potential litigation. The purpose was discussion of new and ongoing covenant cases. It was closed at 1:08 p.m. and opened at 2:20 p.m. August 27. There was a special meeting of the Board of Directors called. In attendance were Dick, Lynn, Janet, Alan, Milton, Nancy, Greg, Andy, Ginny, and Chow. It was closed at 8:25 p.m. and opened at 9:50 p.m. The reason it closed was 1 and 3, discussion of matters pertaining to employees and personnel and also consultation with legal counsel, legal matters. The purpose of the meeting was to discuss a personnel issue. There was a closed meeting of the Audit Committee on September 12, 2018. Jim Young, Greg Swin, Dick Bolton, Ginny Thomas. The vote to close was 4-0. It was closed under Section 1 and 4, discussion of matters pertaining to employees and personnel, and consultation with staff, personnel, consultants, attorneys, board members, or other persons in connection with pending or potential litigation or other legal matters. Purpose was to review an audit report, hold an executive session concerning that audit report, and review several internal audit reports in consultation with staff personnel.
Andy?
Yes.
Andy? This is Greg. I'm here.
Hi, Greg. Welcome.
Hi, just a question. What was the vote to close on the August 27th meeting?
I'll have to go back and look. Just a second. The time to close the meeting, meeting was closed at 9:08 p.m. and opened at 10:38 p.m.
Again, what was the vote to close?
Three and four. Audit committee was 4-0-0. The other meeting was a special meeting called by the chair.
And what was the vote to close?
Vote to close.
The vote to close.
No, it was called by the chair. There was no,
Oh, there's no vote.
right, there's no vote because I called it a closed meeting in the CA Board of Directors. It's a special closed meeting in the CA Board of Directors.
Which is legal.
Well, that
There was
violates
a
the
closed
Maryland
meeting of the Audit
Homeowners Act.
Committee on September 25th.
Jackass.
James Young, Greg Swin, Dick Bolton. The vote to close was 3-0-0. It was closed under Section 1, discussion of matters pertaining to employees and personnel. It was purpose was interviewing and evaluating applicants for an audit committee community member position. The meeting was closed at 7:30 p.m. and opened at 10:03 p.m. All right. Is there a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved.
Nancy moved. Is there a second?
Second.
Ginny seconded. Any discussion? All those in favor? Unanimous. Thank you.
You didn't get votes from people on the phone.
Yeah, well, I didn't hear any no's.
That doesn't mean it's a yes, could be an abstain.
Janet, Greg, Chow?
Yes, it's Greg.
Okay. No disclosures of conflict of interest have been given to me. We're going to move on to resident speak out. So tonight we have resident speak out, but we also have, welcome Janet. We also have scheduled on the agenda is budget testimony. And so we'll take the budget testimony when we get to that section of the agenda. Okay, so first up, resident speak out, David Phillips. Welcome, Dave.
Thank you very much. Is this where you would like me?
Sure, if you could just sit there and talk into the mic so people can hear.
Thank you very much. I'll be brief. I am David Phillips, the director of the Columbia Festival of the Arts, and we've concluded the 31st season, and I've come this evening to thank you for making it such a wonderful event for our community. We had great support from CA staff and CA moral support, and the community turned out. I've passed around Festival Facts. It's a two-sided event that says that there were over 17,000 people at Lake Fest, and that we had 94 Howard County student performers, and there were Maryland performing artists numbering 196, total festival attendance 20,000. And so I've just come to say congratulations and thank you for doing it, and let you know that we ended the second year in a row with no deficit.
Any questions for David? If not, thank you very much. We
Thank you.
appreciate your coming out. And
Sure. Thank you for your service.
okay, next up we have Hilton Gluck. Hilton, welcome. Hope I got your name right.
Yep, you did.
I need that one.
Okay, so in looking at your mission statement, working every day in hundreds of ways to make Columbia an even better place to live, work, and play, I want to focus on the play portion of it. And I have been fighting for the golfers in Howard County who play at Hobbits Glen. And so this is my comments are addressed to Milton Matthew. I sent you an email on June 1, 18, related to Hobbits Glen. I had no response. I followed up on June 13th, no response. I followed it up on July the 5th, no response. It's now 4 months since I've been emailing you. And as the president of CA, I want to know why you have not been responsive to this letter, which I'm going to read out. So this is the letter to you. Dear Milton, I'm writing to convey to you the disgraceful condition of Hobbits Glen Golf Course. A guest of mine recently played there and wrote to me saying the fairways at Hobbits are a train wreck and Hobbits Glen is an embarrassment to Columbia and to Columbia Association. I wanted to share with you my correspondence with Rob Goldman of CA dating back to 2011, during which I outlined the disgraceful condition of the golf course. No matter who CA consulted on this decision, it is absolutely the wrong grass for this climate. Bermuda grass needs constant temperatures at around 100 degrees and abundant rainfall such as exists in Florida. Common sense tells me that all CA have to do is consult with local superintendents at local golf courses like Cattail Creek, Woodmont, who have perfectly manicured fairways to get their answer. So this is the purpose of my mail. In the interim, CA are laying off multiple staff to cut costs, reducing service, and in turn providing a golf course that is in unacceptable condition. I would strongly urge you to be proactive and prorate the membership dues until the course is playable again. Members should not have to pay full dues for a course in such substandard condition. CA needs to be held accountable at some point for a problem that has persisted for almost 10 years. All members deserve better, and such inferior service from CA will not be tolerated. I look forward to hearing what action you are taking to compensate members for the current condition of the course. So essentially the course only became playable in July. And so 2 questions. Why you didn't respond to me? And secondly, what are you doing about it?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any questions? Alan?
Are you familiar with other golf courses in the area?
I am. I'm in the golf business.
I'm not, which is why I asked. Do any other local golf courses use the same kind of grass that we use on Hobbits?
I don't believe so. I don't believe so. And I had approached Rob Goldman 10 years ago, and I included a letter to Milton explaining to him that the grass they're using essentially lies dormant until July, middle to end of July. Okay, that's half the golf season. There's a groundswell, and everybody here should know this, there's a groundswell of dissatisfaction from all the golfers in Howard County and a lot of golfers and a lot of tennis players here as to the fact that they're paying full rates and they can only play on this course for a partial part of the season. So I don't play at Hobbits. I'm here to fight for these people because, as I say, there are a lot of dissatisfied people, and I'm here to speak on their behalf.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions?
Yeah, I have a question.
Yes, Greg. Greg?
Yeah, thanks. Sir, have you attempted to bring your concerns to golf course management? And if you have, what response have you received?
I've sent 3 emails to Milton as the head of CA for him to redirect those, and I've had 0 response.
May I respond? Sir, I acknowledge I received your first one. I forwarded it to our golf course. And at the time I forwarded it, I acknowledged it. You were expressing your personal opinion. You acknowledged your background and whatever. We were exploring options, and we proceeded with those options. We have put a plan in place, and we're moving forward with those plans, notwithstanding your opinion and what your perspective was on it. We have been researching that situation for a long time. We came to a conclusion on a plan, and we worked to finalize that plan. As you acknowledge, came July, the course was in good playing condition. We acknowledged it early in the year. We had suffered a rough winter. But we were on, from my point of view, we were on top of that. Our course management was looking at it, and we were exploring other options, and we're still pursuing those.
So question, why has this gone on for 10 years, number one?
I can't respond to why it's gone on.
Okay, so my point is, why would you not prorate the dues of Howard County residents who can only play on Hobbit's Bend for part of the season, the rest of it they're playing out on dirt? Why? If there is a problem, it's one thing. If it's being addressed, it's one thing. And I'm curious as to how it's being addressed, okay? My issue is, why would you not compensate these people by not providing them the ability to play for a full season?
So that's a topic I can talk to you online, but I'm not going to discuss it with you now.
Okay, but you haven't even responded to my email, so why would
Sir,
you?
I told you that I forwarded your email, the one that I did receive, to the staff.
But I had nobody respond to me.
Okay.
Can you have somebody respond to me, seeing you haven't
We
responded
will
to
follow
me?
up with you, and we are in the information. What our plans going forward is public information. The golfers have been told of it. We have a golf and green committee that's been working very closely with staff. They're fully aware of what our plans are, going back for when it first opened during the spring. So that information has been out there.
This is the only golf course in Howard County and in Baltimore County that's in this kind of condition. The only one. The only one. I did see some reference to sending a team down to Kentucky to try and evaluate the best grass for this area. And what I said to you in my email was, why would they go to Kentucky? All they've got to do is go up the road to Cattail, or go to Woodmont, or go to any of these courses whose fairways are thriving. So I would like somebody to respond to me as to what's being as to what corrective action they're taking, and I'd like CA to respond as to why they will not prorate the dues for all these golfers who are so dissatisfied with the service they're getting from CA.
Well, sir, we will respond to you.
That's
You're
fine.
not speaking on behalf of the other golfers.
Respond
We
to
know-
me.
Yes, we will.
I'd like you to. Thank you.
Thanks, Hilton. Okay, anyone else for resident speak out non-budget items? No, thank you. We'll move on. No, if you can pass it down, thank you. Chairman's remarks, if you look, I did submit them in writing. As I mentioned, Dick and I have started our visits to the villages. So we have a full schedule in October. Any questions?
I signed up for the speak out.
Oh, you did? Oh, I'm sorry, your name wasn't on the list.
Wayne St. Clair.
Oh, Dwayne.
Oh, that's fine.
Oh, you're going to do the budget. You're going to talk.
Oh, okay, it's a budget part.
It's a
Okay.
budget part. Yeah, we have a special section of the agenda set aside just
Okay.
to receive budget testimony.
All right, thank you.
Okay, next up, Production Branch Trail easement request.
Dennis, we ready?
Yes,
Welcome, Dennis.
thank you. This is the same PowerPoint that I gave the board, I guess it was 4 weeks ago now. And I don't have any new information except to say that we find the plan is technically complete and subject to the board's decision on the orientation of the pathway. It's ready for approval.
Did you say the first sentence you just said, the first part of the sentence?
So
Is
this is the same
technically complete or
PowerPoint presentation that I gave to the
Right, I
board.
got that part. It is technically complete or it's not
W-
technically complete?
no, it is.
It is, okay.
So we've reviewed the plans, the engineering plans. We had some comments, and the county has responded to those comments.
Okay, Janet first and then Shari.
I was just curious, so we have received several emails this week.
Janet, could we, I'm sorry, we need just the,
We've received several emails this week about environmental concerns, and so I was wondering if you had any evaluation of the environmental concerns that had been.
So the pathway has to go through the state approval process, in addition to which it's really a lot like every other pathway we have that's in the Stream Valley. So the pathway is going to be underwater in a 100-year flood, and it's not the ideal location, but that's where we have them all over Columbia, so it's really no different than what we have. Is it ideal? No, but there's nowhere else to put it in this case.
Shari.
Okay. Dennis, have you seen the Maryland Department of the Environment reports that have been done on this site?
I haven't seen them, no.
Okay. And so has anyone else on the staff, the recommendation that came through to us was from Al. Has he seen those reports?
County didn't submit the report, just plans and the
Al, you have to,
You come up.
if you're going to respond.
We did not see, the county did not give us any of those reports. We got blueprint plans for the technical engineering and the landscape plans and the legal documents. That's what we reviewed.
Okay. Yeah, so that would be my question is, can we get those reports? I had talked with, I was at the Watershed Advisory Committee meeting on Monday. I asked John McCoy, who is our watershed guy,
Sure.
whether he had seen those reports. He has not. So
No.
nobody really has seen those reports.
Not from our staff. That we could request them of the county, though.
Okay, because my understanding was initially that there were quite a few violations. There was supposed to be some kind of follow-up. I went down to the site also Monday afternoon, and to see if anything else had been done there. There is nothing visually that I can see. There are still just 2 pipes that are right under the asphalt that are running directly from the site right into the river.
Yeah.
But I didn't see anything else there.
So I'm sorry, Sherry, but the violations that you're talking about, are they related to the construction of that building across the street? Is that the violations you're talking about, or?
That there were violations at this site that, to my understanding, related to the water and the river. But I don't know anything more than that because I have not seen the report either.
Well, what I can't testify to is they gave us some new plans, and those 2 outfalls that you're talking about are supposed to be rebuilt, and the outfalls from them rebuilt as well to stabilize the channel. And our staff did make comment on that to the county. But I have not seen, what the MDE had to say about that, if that's the violation you're talking about. I could just tell you from our engineering point of view, we did look at those 2 outfalls, and we did make comment to the county on them.
Okay. And the other thing I had brought up the last time we were talking about this, I never heard anything back, but let me bring it up again. As far as the easement is concerned, did you talk with the county about the use of impervious surface rather than asphalt along that long stretch, right along the banks of the river?
So you mean pervious, not impervious?
Yes, pervious, sorry.
That's okay.
Dennis, you use the microphone.
Oh, I'm sorry. So it really, that's dependent on the type of stormwater management that will be installed is dependent on the soils. And so it's, in my opinion, it's likely that the soils there don't support pervious paving because you're already in the floodplain.
So there are problems with the floodplain.
Well, there are problems with the floodplain everywhere. So they don't, the pervious paving works best when the soil underneath of it is porous, and that's generally not the case in the floodplain. It works great in some place like Annapolis or Anne Arundel County, where there's a lot of sand in the soil. But in Howard County, it's generally not a good fit. We have it in a lot of places, but it's not always a good fit.
Okay. And the other thing I had asked about, have we required any kind of planting barrier along the river side? The plan here calls for the path to dip. There will be an acceleration, and then it will be down quite a number of feet in a very narrow area right next to the river. So if people are coming down there with children, whatever, there was nothing in the plan that I saw, but I have asked about this, whether there will be any kind of barrier next to the water.
By barrier, you mean a landscape barrier, not rocks or a fence?
Any kind of barrier.
I'm sure we could. I'm sure if we asked the county, they would install landscaping there. I don't think that would be a problem for them.
But that has not been built into the easement request.
No, but we could add that. we could make the easement approval subject to that request.
Okay. All right. And my last point, I would just like to point out on this schematic, if I may. Has anybody actually gone in and taken a look at extending this entryway from Guilford to Old Guilford Road, and then having the developer build the road into his area across this area? You'll notice that the retention facilities, the bioretention facilities, the footprint of the storage facility, nothing is going to change. Nothing would be changed. But by doing that across here, first of all, that's a lot less pavement going down. The developer takes care of his road like all the other developers off of Guilford. And Old Guilford Road would not have to be touched, and there would be no necessity of bulldozing all of the existing vegetation, trees, everything that's along the stream buffer. This was something that was raised again in the Watershed Advisory Committee meeting, where there was real concern about knocking all that down. This is really not flat area, right? All of this is
Grade drops.
going down right next to the river. And so it's pretty narrow over there. So we're actually creating a very narrow path that goes down with a dip. I acknowledge that Parks and Rec has really tried to do a good job to come up with something that was better than the first suggestion that they came up with, something that answers our safety questions. But unfortunately, there are now big environmental questions, and there are still safety questions. And I'm really nervous about that, and I'm really concerned. So this is something that represents an alternative, especially if that secondary entrance could be created for the walkers and runners and bikers. That land already belongs to the county. This would be a much lower cost to taxpayers, and it would be a win-win for everyone. So I'm bringing that up again because it seems to me to be a much better solution than taking out all of that stream buffer that currently exists.
So if I could respond. So Al spent a great deal of time looking at alternatives to the existing plan. And ultimately, it comes down to what the developer is willing to do. CA can't legislate him to do something that he doesn't want to. In addition to which, it's further complicated by a little piece of land that's on that little T-strip there that's owned by the Columbia Mall, by GGP. And so it would make that whole process even more complicated. So you have wetlands in that area, you have multiple owners in that area, and you have a developer who would have to agree to make that adjustment after he's already started construction, and he's not required to do so by code, or he has his permits. So there certainly are alternatives, but they're not, we can't legislate the developer to put those in, and then we're left with the county trying to put in a pathway that serves the residents. And the Parks and Rec can't legislate that either. It's a little bit as if it's too late at this point in time to revise the entrance. And I know the developer has suggested that he's willing to listen to alternatives, but based on our experience, he hasn't been. There are a lot of obstacles that would have had to have been overcome. And honestly, at this point in time, he's so far down the road that I'm not sure that there really is, at this point in time, an alternative except what the county Parks and Rec has proposed. But Al did a couple different.
We did those, Siri. I just want to make sure you know that we did consider it. We gave those sketches. I drew them up myself and gave them to the county. The county had meetings with those representatives, with their technical staff from their parks, from their trail designers, from their environmental people, from their traffic engineers at the county. They were all part of those decisions, and what they came back with was a request for us for this pathway. Now, one of the other things that Dennis didn't mention is that alignment that you talked through there, that hits the heart of some pretty large specimen trees, which are a pretty important part of the environment there. And even the alignment I gave them could not save those trees. And I think that had a big part to do with the owner's decision not to go with that route because of the destruction of those specimen trees.
There are lots of trees along the stream buffer,
Yeah.
and I've looked at the trees there. Most of the larger trees, I think there are 4, because I think I read that report.
Mm-hmm.
I think there were 4 trees there that
Yeah.
were left as specimen trees.
Yes, I think that's right.
Yeah, yeah. I'm just wondering if we could hold off on voting on this easement tonight, get a little more time to look at the environmental reports so that we really know what we're dealing with there before we agree to do this. And that's what the WAC suggested. That was brought up several times in discussion with the residents. The developer, I think, could make some changes without changing the footprint, without having to do an awful lot. It would be a redlining, as you said, of the SDP. I think it would make some sense to do that at this point. And I'm thinking that the county council, for example, is not voting on land use issues right now. Maybe it would be a good idea if we took a pause here and held off on voting on this until we had this information, until the community had this information, and people felt more reassured about the options. I just don't understand why we seem to be rushing this through right now when there are some important possibilities that are still out there and information we don't have.
Nancy. Good.
I pass.
Dick.
I am sympathetic to Sherry's point of view, but I'm concerned that there probably isn't anything we can do at this point. The builder, I think it's really unfortunate this building is going up. I think it's unfortunate the way the law is written, that we did not have proper notification. I think it's unfortunate that when we offered to provide an easement across our land for another entrance, that opportunity was not taken. But at this point, the ship has sailed, and this facility is under construction and is. It doesn't look like there's much that we have many alternatives, and. To me, it seems that this alternative pathway actually makes more sense. That particular piece of road is not an attractive pathway. It's a kind of a beat-up, old, dusty road, and before long, there are going to be people driving their U-Haul trucks down there that they don't know how to drive, and it's going to be very, very dangerous. I'd like to see this pathway put in so we have a nice, continuous, attractive pathway which will be more scenic because it'll be closer to the river and it won't be on this nasty old road. So unless there is something that can actually be done, feasibly be done, which doesn't appear, I think we should go ahead and give this easement.
Janet.
So one, I just wanted to mention the cost of any road would be on the developer, and that's, since this is a public road, they have public roadways. So why would a developer take on the additional expense of adding that land across the property? So I mean, I think that's kind of unrealistic to expect a developer to do that. But the bigger thing is if you want to look at this from an environmental standpoint, the truly environmental thing to do would be traffic calming on the existing road, and no one wants to do shared space. So I mean, that would be the really environmentally friendly thing to do. But in the event that no one wants to do that, which is what I'm hearing, I also don't see any other option than to create a path. I don't think taking a pause is going to give us any more environmental. I mean, if the site is having environmental issues, there certainly could be some environmental engineering of the path, but it's not going to change the fact that you have to take out vegetation to put it in. So it seems to me that those are our two options. You do the traffic calming and shared space on the existing road, or you put in the path, which theoretically is safer, and perhaps put a buffer along the stream so that it has that option. But at this point, I also don't see where beyond those two options it makes sense to take a pause.
Jenny.
Yeah. Actually, this is a question for the county guys, I think. My concern is right now when you walk this area, there are cones along here, and people are going from here, taking their bikes or walking, etc., over to here, because you need room for all the construction trucks, etc., which the developer right now has a right to use this road and get into his project, which he's doing. So there's really a safety concern currently. My concern is if we continue to delay the project, at some point we're just maybe creating a big safety problem, and will we lose the opportunity with winter coming to actually construct this path and have an alternative for the bike riders, and there are a lot of them that use this, the strollers, etc. So how do we coordinate that if we keep delaying the project is my question.
Thank you very much. I'm sorry.
I know Jenny asked, can you get the path built?
Not if we keep delaying. So let me address several of the concerns that have come up. So number one, with regard to the environmental concerns, we did submit an application to the Maryland Department of the Environment, and we were just informed today that that's been approved. So they have reviewed the project, have addressed all of their environmental concerns, and have approved the project, and it's actually being circulated for signature now. We expect the permit approval to be received by us early next week. As a part of that review process, they also had the Maryland Historic Trust look at the application, and MHT also had no comments. They did not see any issues with the project. And so in terms of any historical concerns, those have been reviewed and addressed by MHT. With regard to the floodplain, we looked at the entirety of the Protected Branch Trail, and by our calculations, it appears that all but about 1 mile of the Protected Branch Trail is actually in a floodplain already. In terms of the safety with the change in grade, along the pathway itself, we already have plans to put in a fence between the pathway and the river. We can certainly discuss with the CA what the ultimate look of that fence is, but right now the plan is for a split rail fence to prevent children or bicycles, I guess, from maybe inadvertently running into the river. In terms of a pause, you're absolutely right. I mean, I think we're coming up in winter right now. With the MDE approval, being imminent, we are ready to actually move forward with construction of this pathway starting next week, weather permitting. And once the construction begins, we could have the pathway completed in a matter of about 2 weeks. So essentially, we could have this done, before the end of October. If we delay it, then we do run into the weather, and laying any sort of asphalt or a pavement in colder weather is definitely difficult. And so then you're basically looking at the possibility of subjecting the residents to the continual conflict with the construction traffic, with the the green cones and chains that we have right now, and having that be essentially the pathway throughout the winter. We also looked at, in terms of the cost, we originally came to you and said that we estimated that the cost would be about $200,000. Now it's looking like it's actually going to be about $150,000 maybe. We looked at the cost of elevating the pathway and providing some sort of a boardwalk. That cost would be more than triple. So it would be about $675,000 to put that type of a pathway in for that length.
Thanks, David. Nancy, next. I can let Alan go first if you want, and then you can
No, I better say it because I won't say it otherwise. I'm just concerned because this is the first we've heard that the MDE came in with an approval. Was there a report previous to this that you had?
No, we have no report. There's no report that we're aware of. I think what Ms. Zared is referring to is that the developer had failed to file for a permit with the MDE to do their construction work within the floodplain. So that was an oversight on their part. They immediately corrected it. They got the permit. And so they're in compliance with the MDE as far as we know and we're concerned.
I kind of feel like there are major concerns. There are people on both sides of this issue, obviously. And again, CA, we were a little bit late to the table, to put it mildly. And it almost feels like we have a gun to our head that if we don't approve this, then we're going to cost the county and taxpayers, all of us, more money. And we're going to be subjecting the users of the trail to further potential hazard because of the delay of the construction because of the easement. And I really hate being put in that position, frankly. It's a terrible way to make a decision or to vote on an issue. I'll just leave it at that.
Alan.
So that's a great place for me to begin because I feel very much the same way. I want to say I appreciate Dennis and Al, your work on this. It's clear you're taking it seriously, thinking hard about alternatives and doing what you can do given what's been handed to CA. And I certainly want our pathway system to be as complete and robust as possible. That said, I am persuaded by Councilmember Terrasa's testimony earlier that the developer is more willing to be open to alternatives than the county has made him out to be. And it's my belief that while we could say we were to the table late, and I guess I'm willing for us to take our share of the blame, I don't think the county did its due diligence on this development and made it into this mess we're in. It sort of reminds me of when CA handed my village a mess that our board didn't want to deal with. Our chair said, "Why is CA handing us this stinky diaper?" And so it feels like the county has handed us this stinky diaper that now we're supposed to do something about. I don't agree that there isn't anything we can do. There certainly isn't anything we can legislate. We can't force anybody to do anything, but we can play the cards that we have. And I'm would be more in favor of putting, I don't know whether this is putting more pressure on the county or putting more pressure on the developer, but to say, come back with some other alternatives, work more with the developer, see what the developer needs to make it okay for this alternative entrance. And I'd be all in favor, by the way, of ultimately tearing up Old Guilford Road and putting a Old Dusty Road as a problem. But I'm not ready to move. Pending hearing something else in the next few minutes, I'm not ready to move with this gun to our head.
Ginny, and then Milt.
Yeah, we keep hearing about this developer wants to do, X, Y, and Z. I haven't seen any proof of that. And in fact, if anything, the developer is down there constructing his storage facility every day. He's got his stormwater ponds in when I was down there looking at it. He's using the road. He's built the turnaround. So I don't know where this developer is that's been promising some people, but he certainly hasn't pursued it in any way. So I have very little confidence that that developer is going to do anything, and especially considering what Janet said is, who's going to pay for that new road? It's called the developer. Now, if you think a developer in this day and age is going, this isn't Rouse, is going to actually spend more money to put a new road in, I'll sell you the Brooklyn Bridge. Or maybe the Columbia Bridge, huh, guys? Okay. Or Bridge Columbia, I apologize. So I don't feel like I have a gun to my head. I'm concerned about the safety of individuals. I've watched them when Dick, Lynn, and I went down with Dennis trying to get across this narrow area in good weather with their bikes and then, you know, a stroller and people walking. It's dangerous. I agree with Shari, though, and I would like to see that there's a commitment, and I think I just heard there is, from the county to work with CA on the safety issues that she's raised, whether it be a fence or something more attractive, but that you deal with especially that one curb part as you go down. If we have that commitment from you, then I'm satisfied at this point. I'll vote for it, quite frankly. I just think we got to move ahead, you know.
Just very quickly, if the board members remember, on at least 2 occasions, Nancy just said that, and Alan, CA was late to the game. We outlined to the board going back, the developers, or at least the engineers for the developers, approached us in early 2017 not about their an easement from CA or coming across CA land, about the stormwater fallouts, I think it was. We're the ones that approached the developer about the possibility of coming across CAA's land from Guilford Road. At the time, they came back to us and said, given the topography and the cost, that was not an option they were willing to consider. I've stated to the board on several times, and we've been in meetings with the developer. At any time that the developer had come to CA and said they wanted an easement from us, I would have brought it to the board. So I'm not agreeing that the developer is still open to options. The developer is moving forward with this project. Old Guilford is a public road. Everyone has been told frequently, several times, that a private property has to have accessibility to a public road.
Any other, wait, I'll let Greg first and then, sorry, Greg.
Yeah. Have, you mentioned that you had the approvals in hand of MDE and then MHT. What was MHT?
MHT. MHT is part of the approval process when you send an application.
What does it stand for?
Maryland Historic Trust.
Okay.
So they have an approval process if it's in a floodplain, and they reviewed it and approved it. And now once MHT provides their approval to MDE, Maryland Department of Environment, then MDE goes ahead and reviews it and signs off on it.
Did MHT approve demolishing the 150-year-old house or whatever was there?
Again, I have nothing to do with that. That's the developer's land. You know,
Right.
you'll have to ask MHT on
Well,
that one.
it's just sort of ironic that you took down the one historic thing that was there, you demolished it, and then of course they approve it after the fact. Either be that as it may.
Well, we didn't
I know
we
it's
didn't
not-
take it down.
I know it's
The
not
developer
you, but I
took
have
it
to
down.
just put the irony. But that does lead to, again, us coming late to the game. The county, CA, whoever. And the reason I say that is because that house was demolished for a period of months. It stood there. I think that's the first thing the owner did, was knock down that house and just let it sit there, a huge pile of rubble for months. And I didn't know why, and I feel sort of bad that I didn't ask the question, why they knocked it down. But it just sat there. There was no sign saying, you know, coming soon, unsightly storage facility, nothing like that. It just was a demolished home. And I feel like we, whether it's CA, whether it's the county, someone who knew what was in the cards should have raised a flag at that time and said, we have a potential problem here. And it was, again, a period of months. I know it. I was down there myself. Some of the stone is in my yard now. It's true. Beautiful. But, again, I do agree we're late to the game. But what do we do now? That's the question. What I'd like to do now is I do agree. I think Shari said it, that we have a watershed expert on staff, John McCoy. I would be interested to get a report from him. I'd like to direct that he review the plans and provide the board a written report on possible impacts of this proposal. That's why we have somebody. And I think before we give up our land to put a path this close to the river, we ought to have our watershed expert opine on what he thinks of this. And so I'm not, I'll tell you right now, I'm not going to vote on this until we at least have that. Sorry.
Yeah, I was going to say, you know, Milton, when you say that you and the staff were approached in 2017, so somebody knew that this project was moving forward, but our village didn't know.
Well, we didn't know what the project, we were approached by the developer's engineer. That person they were doing their preliminary look at the site. No, we did not follow up with anyone because we reached out to the developer, we shared our insights, and they went away. We didn't hear back from them anymore.
So we didn't know whether there was a preliminary sketch and whether anything had been presented to the planning board or to the Department of Planning and Zoning. So this thing arose and then it just dropped under the radar. And we didn't know anything at the village level, along the river. Nobody knew anything, as Greg said, until we saw a demolished building. And that was my question also. If we have the Maryland Historical Trust, what does that mean? Isn't that supposed to stop those kinds of buildings from being demolished without some sort of at least public process? What meaning does that have? You know, there are so many pieces of this that have just not gone the way good governance is supposed to go. And I fear the same thing with this environmental issue, that we are going to miss big things. When I went over there last time and I saw that the Patuxent River, in the past, this is the past, this is not the last couple of weeks with the amount of rain that we've gotten and the flooding that we've gotten. And I've been by there several times. But in the past, the river dropped 60 feet from Guilford to Savage. Okay? And that's why it was used in the mills. What about the water volume? What about the amount of water that will continue, that will go in there now with more impervious surface, knocking down more trees? We don't know these effects. So Greg's point is a good one, that why not get at least an expert to take a look at this and give us some data? Why not have a strategy that links? This is not just about this one little portion. It's about how do we link this to Savage in the same way that somebody should have been looking into what links what's going on up here to Ellicott City down here. We've seen too many examples here. So I am very nervous about this because it seems there are red flags here. There are flashing lights. I don't know what it means yet.
Let's vote. I think it's obvious that nobody is happy with this situation. And we're not happy with the process. We're not happy that something like this can happen. But it's happened. And the developer followed all the legal steps that have to be taken. And here we are, we're confronted with a situation where this is going to happen. This facility is under construction. The road is a public road. The developer has no interest in spending his money to put another road in. And if we did, specimen trees would be gone. In the meantime, people are using this piece of road that they're going to have to share, which they are currently sharing, with dangerous traffic. And we have to make a decision as to what's going to happen. We could kick this can down the road and nothing is going to change. That road that is currently being used by hikers, by bikers, by people with strollers is going to be shared with trucks. And it's passed all the approvals. This is a steamroller you're not going to stop. So we have to think what is best in this terrible situation? What can we do with this, this horrible situation? What can we do to ameliorate it to the point we can? How can we get the public out of danger from trucks on this road? How can we get this thing done quickly so they're not sharing the road with construction vehicles? We can stall this. We can throw sand in the gears, but at the end of the day, this thing's going to be built, and the question is, will there be an adequate pathway for hikers and other users?
Nancy.
The only thing we have now is the power of voting in favor of the easement. But if we still have any power left, it is to wait until we have the information that Sherry has been suggesting that would be very beneficial to make sure that this is the best possible plan for the users of this pathway. Our concern is not about the developer. The developer takes good care of the developer. And my concern, and some of our concerns that have been voiced, is that this is our opportunity to say, rather than bulldozing forward, let's put the brakes on. There's no rush. If it's not done next week, it might be a couple weeks later. But there's no reason to rush into something when there might be a better solution to some of these questions.
What powers do we have?
The power is that we don't vote to approve the easement
It's not
tonight.
going to stop anything.
And why do they even need our vote?
Well, they'd like to get the pathway in, and we want the pathway in. We want something in.
We do want
So
something,
what
but we
do we
don't
do
want
to
just
stop?
anything.
What's our power?
All right, I know, I appreciate the conversation, but
I'm sorry.
Okay. Milton was next, then Dick.
In the county can speak for this themselves, but we have already been told by the county that if there's no easement from CA, the public road will remain, and the bikers and hikers and all the users will share the public road.
Jeez.
And so it's a decision you have to make.
And we'll get the blame for that,
Right.
for sharing the public road.
And why is this a big deal?
oh, we will not get the blame for that. In fact, you can rename this, someone from DPC's name this stretch of Guilford Road because it's on them. It's not on us. The county situation they create here, and then put this on us to sort of help them out. I don't feel that's fair. And again, Dick, all we're talking about, we're not talking about stopping the construction. You're right. No one's going to do that. We can't. But what we can do is at least get a little better sense of comfort that this isn't going to have the deleterious effects that many of our residents fear, and sort of commonsensically I'm worried about just because it's so daggone close to the river. So all I'm asking is, can we at least take a few more weeks, whatever it takes for John to go out there and take a look at the plans, knowing what he does about the watershed in this particular area, and just give us some type of written report back that we can consider before we grant the easement. Because it may be, Dick, it may be that those deleterious effects outweigh giving the easement. It may be. I don't know.
Good. Next, the next
Dick,
vote is a
Dick.
month away.
Dick.
So
Alan.
it seems to me, I agree with Greg on this, we're in an election year. And my fellow Alan, Mr. Kittleman, may not want to have this hanging around his neck. So I don't see this being on CA's watch. This is the county. And county, whether it's county DPZ or county executive, that's who this is on.
Yeah.
I was wondering if the county could elaborate on what Maryland Department of Environment looks at and what was contained in their report.
So Raul can elaborate a little bit more on what they look at, but there's no report per se. We are filing an application, and then they are looking at the application and either approving it or not approving it. I can tell you in terms of, what the application looks for. It's, how much of the floodplain is being disturbed. Is there any, net, fill going in, or is there a cut of soil coming out? Things like that. What we've reported to the MDE is that there's a net neutral, that there's, yes, dirt is being moved around, but we're not either putting too much dirt in or taking too much dirt out.
And by moving dirt around So is there cut and fill that has to happen to support the path?
Yes, because where the pathway is, it has to be leveled out, and so there has to be some regrading of that area. And in terms of the trees, there are, I think, 32 trees that are having to be removed, but we are replanting trees. All the 32 trees are fairly young trees that were put in when the sewer line was put in that same area several years ago.
Ginny?
And if I may just address some of the other things with the developers and so forth. I mean, I think ultimately what the developer would like is something that we can't provide, which is to turn back the clock. If we could, and they were at the beginning stage of their development, and they could put and design sort of on a blank slate where the entrance could be, that might be something different. But right now, the storage facility is the foundations are in the ground. A lot of the infrastructure has already been planned, and so there is nothing that we can do at this point to change that. As a county, we're trying to provide a solution, because the developer is by right permitted to use Old Guilford Road, to provide a solution that will take the pedestrians and bikers out of conflict with the traffic that is going to be on Old Guilford Road, in terms of both the construction and later on the traffic that will be used in the storage facility.
Have John take a look at it. We can have John take a look at it and have it back to the agenda for both, along with John's report for the October.
Go ahead, Ginny.
Thank you.
Ginny?
Yeah, I just have a question about exactly what John McCoy's role would be in this. We have the State Department's doing one thing. What exactly would John do? Dennis, maybe?
John would look at the plan and review it in the context of the overall watershed, but in reality, we're not talking about a great deal of additional pervious paving. There's not a material impact on the floodplain or the watershed. I mean, John spends a lot of his time on streams and on the ponds, on lakes. This is really, it's important to the residents and we've talked about this, and it's important, the process is important, but in reality, this is really a small little bit. And we have 95 miles of pathway, and I bet 75 of it is, and we don't want to add more, but the fact is, a month from now, that's going to open. And ultimately, we're either going to have a pathway separate from that roadway, or we're going to somehow have pedestrians and bikers and moms and strollers sharing the roadway with it's your call, but it's not a huge
What I'm
impact.
asking, I want to deal with reality tonight, okay? Because I know there's a lot of other people waiting to talk on other issues. So if this board were to delay it, waiting for John McCoy's looking at it, are we being realistic about John really has anything to say about it or would contribute anything? We could always condition approval on this, that John take a quick look at it and let us know whether he has a significant problem or not, but within a couple of days, so that it doesn't hold up. If he doesn't, the county doing it, or is that not even realistic?
Well, you could further condition it to say that if John McCoy has any comments or suggestions, that they would be implemented into the plan.
Okay, I would like to do that, and also I assume Sherry's comment about the safety, that we already got that okay, but let's condition it with that we'd be looking at safety issues. Those two conditions would automatically be on the resolution that we'd be considering for approval.
Okay, so Jerry.
Yeah, I just wanted to say, one of the reasons I think John has a great reputation in the community. I think people feel an enormous amount of trust in him. He has done a wonderful outreach job. John can explain things in ways that people in the community can understand. So that's an important part if we are going to make this a more transparent process. I think the other comment I want to make is we have had, CA has a watershed advisory committee. If we don't start listening to the people on our committees, we've spent a lot of time talking about what are these committees going to do. The whole point is to listen to their concerns. They are representing residents. They are representing every village in Columbia. So the point of rushing this thing through, there's nothing that CA will lose if the earth movers actually go through in the spring and not this month. Bear in mind that with the construction going on there, the safety concerns that our village brought up, this has been going on since September. So I do understand and I appreciate the fact that you're concerned about people being on the road at the same time. But during the winter time, the numbers of people who are out there do go down. And so far, maybe we've just been very, very lucky, but I think people are paying attention to being careful. Certainly the trucks are.
Chow? All right. Dick?
I'd like to call the question.
There hasn't been a motion made.
You have to make a motion to.
And I move that we issue the easement with the conditions that Ginny has raised, that we run it by John McCoy and get his okay on it. And what was the other one?
Well, and you also coordinate with the county and CA in terms of safety issues. So this is really a partnership where they continue to work together. It's not just we turn over the easement and we're out of this. The concerns would be continue to be looked at, but we will have granted, if everything works out okay, from the staff point of view, it doesn't have to come back to the board is what I'm saying. Okay, that would be the conditions.
Okay, so if
I'll second that.
all right, so let me just make sure I have this straight.
Wording, okay.
So the motion is to approve granting the easement subject to having the safety issues addressed and also having John McCoy look at this and his issues addressed before any easement is granted.
Correct.
Okay, just want to make sure.
And I'm going to move to table until we have John McCoy's report to where the board can consider it. That's my motion. Move to table until we get John McCoy's report.
Second.
Okay. I gotta write that one down. Just a second. Yeah. All right. I'll take the motion on tabling. All those in favor of tabling this till next month, basically. So we have for Alan, just a second, Greg, Shari, and Nancy.
We have Chow.
Chow?
Chow?
Doesn't seem to be there.
Opposed?
Those opposed. Janet, Ginny, Dick, Andy. Motion fails.
Okay. So can we vote on the resolution?
Yep. All right. Any other amendments? If not, I'll call the question on the motion, which is granting the easement subject to the two conditions. All right. All those in favor of the granting of the motion with the conditions?
Easement with conditions.
So it's Janet, Ginny, Dick, and Andy. I need more paper at the rate this is going. Okay, all those opposed. So we have Alan, Greg, Nancy, and Sherry.
Is Chow voting?
Chow seemed.
Chow asked me to text him when we're voting, so I texted him. I don't know if he's.
Yeah, I've been asking him, but I haven't heard anything.
Okay, the motion fails.
Motion fails.
All right, I move that we direct staff to have John McCoy review the plans, provide a written report to the board on the likely impacts to the watershed.
you get that, Valerie?
Likely impact of the.
Likely impacts to the watershed.
Second.
Okay, any further discussion? All those in favor? Okay, let me a second here. Let me get this. Alan?
Yeah. Yes.
Ginny? Greg? Shari? Nancy? Dick? Opposed? Janet and Andy? Yep.
Hello?
Ah, hi, Chow. Sorry, Chow.
Hello?
I missed all the votes.
Can I see your vote?
Three of them.
Greg,
Can you hear me?
So can I still vote?
Can you reconsider a vote? We don't know how he's going to vote.
Hello?
Yes. Okay. Milton?
Greg, is it,
Chow just asked a question.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
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 Can I still vote for the easement?
No, we're on asking John McCoy for a report on the impact of the pathway on the watershed, right? And that passed.
Hello? Can you hear me?
We can hear you, Chow, yes.
Trump calling Mexico.
No,
Can anybody hear me?
Yeah.
Hear you, Chow.
Chow, come on.
Hello?
Chow, we can hear you. We can hear you, but
Okay, okay, I can hear that. Who's speaking? I got a question for that easement. Do we have the vote?
The votes were just taken on the easement. The easement
Yeah,
itself
yeah.
failed.
Did you vote
but
already or not?
the easement vote itself failed, but a motion to ask John McCoy, our watershed person, to look at the situation and give us a report on the impact of the proposal to the watershed, that did pass.
Okay, I think that's good. Sounds good.
All right. No.
Is it
I
my
would support that.
Okay, put it on mute now.
Is it my understanding that along with the report, we'll have it back on the board?
Okay, I will call back.
And for a vote on at the October board meeting?
It's up to the setter of the agenda, but my expectation would be yes.
I'm posing the question. I want to.
Well, can I ask a clarifying on that? I would hope that if John can get this done, that we would be able to deal with it the first meeting in October.
No, that's a work session.
I know we normally don't, but, okay.
Welcome to my pain.
We have a policy on that. We can do it through a supermajority. We can vote to change our policies.
Yeah, but is John McCoy really going to be able to go out there and write a report in 2 weeks?
Yeah,
Come on,
look,
guys.
we've asked staff to go.
Realistic.
When John's report is ready, then we will
Yes.
readdress this, okay? I'm not going to talk for staff, sorry.
Yes.
All right, look, we're way over time. Let us go on, board reports. President's report, any questions? No. Okay.
Did you ask Milton?
Yep, sorry, Milton, anything you want to say? No? Okay. CA rep, Inner Arbor, any questions? Nope. Okay, good, thank you. All right, on the first quarter financial reports, the audit committee did review them. Dick, Ginny, Greg, anything you want to say about it?
No.
Okay, good.
About what again? I'm sorry.
Financial reports. First quarter financial reports. Okay. Okay, dashboard. I'm sorry, Susan. Do you have anything you wanted to say? I mean,
No.
we're just a little behind schedule.
Fine. So, well, I would just open the dashboard subject up to questions.
Right.
If anyone has
So,
any.
anybody have any questions on the dashboard?
Dashboard down till we hear from the residents, because we might have some questions about it, and could we move it after?
Well, we already got it. Let's
You can always ask
just go
questions
through
about
it.
it after the residents.
Let's just go through it real
Oh,
quick.
never mind then. Okay.
All right. Any questions on the dashboard?
We don't want to hold things.
I would just, I would just ask if we don't have time, if you have questions, please send them to us. There's a lot of information there, and I want to hope and believe that you're reading it. And so if you do have questions, just please send them to us.
Yeah, the one thing I would just say is the one that was kind of worrying for me was the fitness center score was down low. So if you have any words to say on that, you can just email us.
Supreme
Well,
Court.
it reflects the athletic club being closed.
Oh, is that what it reflects that? Okay, that makes sense. Remember, this was July 31st, so.
Correct.
All right. We will move on to budget testimony. Thank you very much. I appreciate everyone's time. First up, Jonathan, representing Oakland Mills. Welcome, Jonathan.
Thank you. Doesn't get a last name.
Good evening. Thank you. I'm Jonathan Edelson. I'm the chairman of the Oakland City Association Board of Directors. I'd like to thank all of you for the opportunity to present the Oakland Mills request for the CA fiscal year 20 budget. The full board discussed the request at our August 28th and then finalized it at our September 11th, 2018 board meetings. We ask your consideration of these requests and thank you in advance for your time and cooperation during the budget process. I have these broken up as we often do. So the first section is about the other barn and the neighborhood center facilities in Oakland Mills. These are in priority order. So our first priority is the replacement of the HVAC units in the loft of the other barn. There was a recent assessment study of the other barn indicating the necessity to replace the HVAC units.
Oh, am I? Oh, I'll get to hold a mic now. Wow.
Can walk around.
Yeah.
A song.
According to CA's HVAC replacement schedule, the units are not scheduled for replacement till fiscal 21. We're requesting that the replacement be moved up to fiscal 20 for a couple of reasons. First, this year, we've had 2 power outages at the other barn. After each of the outages, one of the loft HVAC units failed to operate normally. It took the repair folks hours to pull them apart, replace and repair the components that are aging inside. The reason this is a concern for us is the other barn is our largest source of revenue for meeting and social. I get another microphone. Meeting and social rentals. So you can imagine what happens if one of these systems goes down when we're having a wedding or a large gathering. Most weekends we have up to 220 guests attending events at the other barn, Friday, Saturday, and Sundays. I experienced one firsthand recently. We had a Jazz in the Mills event. We had about 200 people there. I was there. It was really hot. In fact, the woman sitting next to me kept tapping me on the shoulder, whispering in my ear, "Why can't we get this place cooler?" And that woman wasn't Ginny. She was sitting on the other side. It was the woman behind us. Kept tapping me on the shoulder.
About the Jazz being hot.
No, well, the Jazz was hot, but the room was hotter. The room was very uncomfortably hot. We keep the air conditioning unit set at the lowest temperature, where they won't freeze up, and it runs continuously, but it's not cooling the room of that size. We're afraid we're at risk of losing rental income because of insufficient heating and cooling in the other barn. So we're asking if that schedule can be moved up. However, before just replacing, we're also asking an evaluation of the existing venting configuration in the loft. If you can picture what the loft looks like, all of the registers are on one side of the room at about the level of my head, about 5.5 to 6 feet up. In our opinion, we haven't done an airflow study, but in our opinion, just knowing what the room feels like, it seems as if the airflow coming out of those registers isn't really coming all the way across and cooling the whole room, because the stage, the dance floor are on the opposite side of that room. Moving on from the other barn, we support the CA request for a Category 2 funding of the Talbot Springs Neighborhood Center ADA renovation design and ADA upgrades to have an ADA accessible restroom. We support the CA request for Category 2 funding for the Stevens Forest Neighborhood Center for ADA interior upgrades. We would also like to have consideration of repaving and striping of the parking lot adjacent to the other barn, along with stenciling for other barn only parking signs. It's a relatively small lot. It has about 10 spaces, and it's getting into pretty bad disrepair. From here, I'll move on to the open space and facility request. The board voted unanimously on August 28th to support a second sheet of ice to put to rest any questions about whether the village board supports that. So we continue to advocate for a state-of-the-art and expanded ice rink in the Oakland Mills Village Center, both to help the folks who use ice in Columbia and Howard County, as well as to help our currently struggling village center. And then with open space, we commend the open space assessment that CA conducted. We are requesting, though, that CA consider investing about $150,000 to hire outside consultants to do an open space assessment to determine what course open space should take in the next 50 years, now that Columbia is, I guess, 50 years plus 1 year old, so that we can keep up with environmental changes and residents' expectations. With that, I also have other written testimony where we have like a tot lot assessment and also a look at stream erosion control. We have several residences within Oakland Mills that are really battling stream erosion. Some of this has been going on for considerable time.
Any questions, John? Great.
Okay, the second sheet of ice. It's intriguing. I've been here a while. I don't know if has staff done taken a look at what that would entail, any type of rough order of magnitude, or whether it's even buildable?
I don't know whether we've done the biggest thing that I've found out since I've been here and reading reports is that the parking restrictions. Right now, you're talking about a 60 vintage building. Is grandfathered with the code requirements and other things. If we look at trying to, you're not going to get a second sheet of ice in that site. So you're basically talking about basically a brand new building that would accommodate 2 sheets of ice. And we right now, number one, the costs, and number two is just the new code requirements, especially parking, that we will be subjected to.
Right, we run into the same issue when we wanted to do more with the swim center. We ran into the same issue.
Right.
Of not being able to go outside the existing footprint.
If you look at that part, you look at the site where the ice rink is, there are very few dedicated CA parking spots there. We own very few of those, if any of those parking spaces.
Now, from a village perspective, though, I've been to the ice rink a few times over the years. It's always crowded. How confident are you that the demand is there for an expanded facility?
We've talked to some of the ICE groups. In fact, Ginny, before she was on the CA board, when she was the co-chair of the Oakland Mills board, she and I went and talked to the Howard Huskies, for example, and they told us, they actually told us a bit about their finances. And they're just one example, but they are actually spending more money per year, or at the time, where I can't speak for what they did this year, but at the time, are spending more money per year at the ice rinks in the neighboring counties for ice time than they're spending in Howard County. And it's not because they don't want to spend it here, it's because it's not available here. So the ice time at the rink is maxed out, and the demand is greater than the amount of ice time available at that rink. We know that much from talking to the Huskies and other groups.
And one last question. On your 3 requests, you say, okay, at least the first 3 requests are in priority order, right?
The request for the facilities under OMCA management, the other barn and the neighborhood centers, we prioritize those.
Gotcha.
The rest are CA open space, CA ice rink. They're not under our management, so we didn't put a priority order on those.
Alan, and then Char.
Just so I'm clear, your number 1, you're requesting to move it ahead a year.
Yes.
Are numbers 2 and is number 2 already in the budget? And you're just saying thank you, or what are you saying here? Or do you want something added to the budget?
No, we are voicing our support for that because we know there's been discussion about the neighborhood centers. Stevens Forest and Talbot Springs either currently have tenants or Talbot Springs is about to, but one of the challenges has been the ADA accessibility at both of those facilities, so we want to ensure that gets taken care of.
Thank you. And the parking lot, I assume would be added to the budget. You're requesting that be added?
Yes, yes. If you pull up beside the other barn and look at the parking lot, you really can't see the lines or anything in the parking lot anymore. You sort of figure out where to park.
And nobody's, I realize you want it repaved, but nobody's thought to just go out with a can of white paint and refresh the lines? Thank you.
Sorry. And then
Yeah. All right, so Talbot Springs and Stevens Forest neighborhood centers, do you have any other neighborhood centers, or are those your only two?
We have Thunderhill.
You have Thunderhill, and is Thunderhill ADA accessible?
I'll check with our village manager. I believe that one is.
Okay, so you do have a handicapped, an ADA design in that one.
I believe that one is. I can get back to you on that.
Yeah,
Yes.
thank you.
Yes.
Thank you.
I understand you have a new childcare center moving into the Talbot Springs.
Yeah, that's the incoming tenant I referred to for Talbot Springs. Yes.
And do they need anything other than the ADA upgrades? Are they okay with what you have there?
So as one of the conditions of having childcare come in, we had to have the county come in and inspect things for code, and everything else there passed. So the county is allowing childcare to come into that center.
Any other questions for John? Thanks, John.
All right, thank you.
Next up, we have Kevin from Wild Lake. Welcome, Kevin.
Always the best dressed man in the room, Kevin.
Those are his pajamas.
Thank you, Kevin.
Almost like you're running for office.
As always, it's great to see everyone. I am Kevin McLilly. I represent the Wild Lake Village Board. I'm the chair. It was great seeing many of you at the Board Excellence Workshop yesterday. I want to thank each and every one of you for your service to Columbia. On behalf of the Wild Lake Village Board, we thank you for this opportunity to participate in the conditional budget process. Our board would like to thank CA for funding several projects in 2019, including expanding the deck and fence at Faulkner Ridge Pool, installing viral retention facilities in Faulkner Ridge, introducing the first water journey splash pad amenity at Running Brook Pool, and replacing the roof at Slayton House. At our September 4th meeting, the Wild Lake Village Board discussed the following initiatives and projects. The first one, Slayton House Theater renovations. The Wild Lake Village Board, again, appreciates your continued support of Slayton House. It's a unique amenity in Columbia. Lots of people use it. We get a lot of individuals that are going to private schools that use it during the day. They practice their plays there. Specifically in February of this year, the CA Board approved planning funds for fiscal year 2019 and included $470,000 in the fiscal year 2020 conditional budget to upgrade theater lighting and electrical systems, install a new sound system, and replace interior finishings. The current system is the original system, and we're still dealing with floppy drives and things to that effect. Slayton House staff has been working with our CA staff, or with your CA staff. The Wild Lake Village Board requests approval of the conditional funds for the theater renovation in 2020. The second item is a tot lot shade structure. Recently rebuilt tot lot near the barn at Wild Lake is very popular with the families visiting the park. However, because of a lack of shade nearby, usage of this new tot lot is limited during the hot, sunny days. In order to increase the comfort and usability of the tot lot throughout the year, the Wild Lake Village Board suggests adding a shade structure to the playground. Adding shade keeps play areas cooler, which allows children to utilize the tot lot during the summer months. In addition, a shade structure protects children and their families from harmful UV rays all year round. The Wild Lake Village Board requests funding of a shade structure at the tot lot located at the barn. those are only items for 2020. Are there any questions?
Thanks, Kevin. Any question? Alan?
Yes, sir.
The shade structure. You're talking about an umbrella over a sandbox, or you're talking about a roof the size of this room? What are we talking about?
At the pools, there currently are shade structures which are almost made out of tent materials. And we're suggesting something like that just rises up above the area, just covers that.
Top lot?
Yeah.
Thank you.
And it's a very, very small tot lot. I don't know if anyone's been near there. There might be 2 or 3 swings. And
Thanks.
sand pit, that's about it.
Janet?
I was just curious how the splash pad was received.
Very well, thank you. We had in August, we had a very, very nice joint gathering with Town Center and with Wild Lake residents. Everyone was fantastic with the plans. We were able to tell them about it. At that point, it was a full house and everyone loved the idea. Currently, there is a small baby pool, wading pool. No one uses it because of the fancy flotation devices that they put on the little kids now. You see these little arm blow-up devices, and the kids go right into the big pool with their parents. No one uses the baby pools, so this splash pad was well received.
Any other questions? Thanks, Kevin.
Thank you. Take care.
Okay, next up, we have Deborah Wisner, who's representing the Watershed Committee. Thank you, Deborah.
Good evening, and thank you for the opportunity to provide input on the fiscal year 2020 budget. On Monday, the Watershed Advisory Committee met and reviewed the projects identified for both fiscal year 2019 and 2020. We wanted to determine if there had been progress made in addressing stormwater issues and the maintenance of the existing stormwater retention areas that are on CA's property. The committee agrees that the watershed projects and the accompanying monetary requests identified for the fiscal year 2020 budget are still needed to meet both legal requirements and the environmental stewardship that is called for by CA's goals. We understand that the board has voiced concerns about the cost to mitigate the Proudfoot area in Harper's Choice. That's roughly set up at a $550,000 budget right now. CA Watershed staff indicate that they are already working with Howard County to develop a design that uses best management practices and will convert this area to an active stream bed. If that can be done, Howard County will be able to use those pollution credits against the TMDL requirements for non-point solution. Planning and negotiations are already underway, and the committee believes that this follows the examples that were set by the Dobbin Road stream restoration, which is now completed, and the upcoming State Highway Administration stream restoration that's going to occur through Town Center, Wild Lake, and Harper's Choice. It shows how public and private cooperation, private being CA, public being either the county or the Highway Administration, can achieve both regulatory requirements and positive environmental results for our community. We certainly hope there will be some savings off of the original budgeted request if Howard County agrees to cost share on the Proudfoot area. The beauty of our Columbia Lakes attracts citizens to live here and once here to enjoy the outdoor activities and active wildlife viewing. Keeping those lakes clean and safe require regular dredging. The 2020 budget includes funds to prepare for the next dredging of both Lake Kittamaqundi and Lake Elkhorn. The good news is that this planning will now include use of the Murray Hill sediment area in King's Contrivance for containment of the dredged materials, saving roughly 40% over having to truck those materials out of the state in order to have them resolved elsewhere. Further, the SHA stream restoration will help to reduce the sediment that's flowing into Lake Kittamaqundi. Several projects seek to correct areas along the pathways, These projects include areas in Harper's Choice, Long Reach, Hickory Ridge, and Owen Brown villages. The remediation to stabilize those areas helps prevent additional erosion. There's always potential for stormwater to breach new areas, especially when climate change or Mother Nature's wrath cause us to have more frequent and heavy storms. We ask that the board allow the CA staff to make decisions and seek concurrence to address those issues on an emergency basis and resolve them with funds in future budgets.
Thank you, Deborah. Any question?
Well, no, just, could you send us that electronically?
Yes, it will be sent out to you electronically.
Great.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah, Chow, as soon as Greg.
Let him go. Let Chow go
Chow, you can ask your question.
Okay, good. So, the Kings contrivance has any complaint? You put the dredging stuff there?
Chow, you need to get closer to your phone. We're not hearing you.
Okay. So the Kings contrivance complain when we put the stuff from the lake left there, the sediment.
He's asking about
People
complaints.
complain when we bring the dirt. I think it means when we bring the dredging sediment over to Murray Hill. Or we
No, that area has been set aside, Mr. Chow, for all of sediment drainage. It's currently accepting sediment from other areas, ponds that we have dredged this year already.
So that's the reserve area for us, is that right?
It's very well hidden as well.
Okay, sorry. Okay, thank you.
Great.
Yeah. Again, thanks for coming in, Deborah. I've always, you know this, had a problem with the Proudfoot project. You go back there, it looks like a very pretty, idyllic wetlands.
It's great wetlands for mosquitoes, yes.
Anyway, in any event, your opinion in the watershed committee believe that the best path for this, no pun intended, is to go along and convert this into
Yes, by converting it to a stream, it will make it an area that can accept water from the impervious surfaces above it. Plus, it will keep it actually moving so that we don't end up with as much detritus in that area. Right now, that whole stream area is overwhelmed with weeds, mile-a-minute growth, etc., and we'd rather see it go to a stream bed. The stream bed is something that Howard County can take credit for because the state and the EPA require us to meet the total maximum daily load for streams, and the county needs to get credits. Otherwise, Howard County won't make its overall goal with the EPA.
All right, and one other question is, I've seen there's some pretty significant erosion on the part of the stream below the path.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have any concerns at all whether that erosion is going to be exacerbated if the pond is turned into a running stream?
No, there's no intention for it to be further eroded. They will probably be putting riprap. We haven't seen the complete design yet, but they will probably be putting riprap on the side to keep further erosion from going, and they will also change slightly the pathway so that it can move slowly. The whole idea of slowing the flow, John's not going to give up on that by turning this over to the county.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Dennis? Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you.
Appreciate the input from the committee.
I would ask, as a committee chair, if we could hear from the board about any decisions that you make with regard to modifying erosion areas, especially areas around personal homes. Some of the areas have been brought to our attention, but we know that there is an issue with the board in terms of how much do we mitigate those things.
And we'll make sure our watershed rep informs the committee.
Thank you.
Thank you.
There's more than me for a second.
No, sorry. Next up, Dwayne. Welcome, Dwayne. Sorry it took so long, but welcome.
What's his last name?
Dwayne Sinclair.
No, Deborah. I know Dwayne.
Here, yes.
Thank you.
Sorry.
I wanted to say that I think everybody should have seen the email that I had sent out yesterday, which kind of gave you the scope of what our request is and rationale for why we'd like to see the CA board consider supporting our request to have the Locust Park tennis courts be converted into permanent pickleball courts. earlier this spring, we had members. We have a 200-member and growing association of pickleball players. I'm the founder and past president of the Howard County Pickleball Association. I'm authorized to speak on their behalf here tonight. Earlier this spring, we looked at the 4 tennis courts that CA has as part of their open space. They're not part of the regular tennis facilities, as part of the open space program, to see how they were being utilized and if one of those courts could be used by the pickleball players to meet our growing needs. We were using the tennis courts over by the ice rink in Oakland Mills, and we were getting sometimes more than 40 players trying to play on 4 courts that had been lined by CA, and we were really looking at having an additional facility identified. And in looking at the other tennis courts, we saw that the usage at Locust Park appeared to be non-existent. The court had cracks in it, so there was going to have to obviously be some type of maintenance and improvement there if it was going to be continued to be utilized. Grass was actually growing in the cracks. So I had contacted Dennis Matty to see if there was possibility of adding pickleball lines there at Locust Park, and he was really cooperative in having lines painted there, so we were able to use both those facilities. The problem with just having courts lined is that our association has to have volunteers come and set up nets for those usage, so it limits our play opportunities to a couple of times a week for a few hours. But during those times, it's not unusual that we get 20, 30 people playing at multiple facilities. So it indicates that there's a growing population within Columbia, Howard County, and obviously throughout the nation is the information that I had presented in the email. We think as an association there would be a great enhancement for Columbia and for CA to provide an opportunity to meet this growing sport, which predominantly is a sport that is attracting people in the 50-plus community, which certainly reflects the fact that Columbia as a community, as our nation, is aging, and this population is increasingly looking at having opportunities to remain active. Okay. And I just wanted to say that I think, you know, the possibility of having these as permanent pickleball courts would be a great enhancement for the Columbia Association to provide this for your maturing community, in addition to possibly bringing people back into CA as members, because sometimes a mature community, once kids leave the home, may drop CA membership. So I think that's another reason to look at this as a possible use of capital budget money for open space in this way for renovating one of these courts at Locust Park to pickleball.
Thanks, Dwayne.
Yep.
Jenny?
Yeah, Dwayne, in terms of the Locust Park site, have you checked with CA in terms of the study that's going on as to maybe considering that site for an indoor pool?
I've heard that there was consideration of...
I don't know whether that would involve the tennis courts or not, but...
I don't know specifically if that would impact the conversion of those tennis courts.
We need to really look at that first before...
I have talked to Dennis about this idea, and it's part of when I had asked him for the additional lining, and he said that he asked if we would have contact with Long Reach Village to see if there was any opposition to having that conversion. We did present to the board. I think the question that we got then was, will this mean that it comes out of our requests for improvement for Long Reach? And my understanding is that this would come out of the open space budget. So but he didn't indicate that that was going to be any problem in terms of, you know, being able to consider this. He certainly, I can't speak for him, but he certainly seemed open if we were able to get support for doing this, that was something that they would consider.
Alan?
Are the 6 pickleball courts in Owen Brown usable by your association?
They are, right.
Can you give me a sense of the usage?
What's that?
Can you give us a sense of the usage that you're...
Well, it's early in the development of that, and I know CA was not looking at really doing a lot of publicizing and development of programming for those courts until the fall, so we're really very early in the stage in terms of how they want to utilize those facilities. But I anticipate that there will be a considerable amount of play. The problem is that obviously there are people who are not CA members, so that's not a facility they can easily use. A lot of Columbia residents play pickleball at the YMCA, including my wife and myself. We've just dropped our Y membership because we can now play at CA. So a lot of pickleball players were playing at the YMCA.
Any other questions? No, thank you.
Okay, thank you.
That's all I have on my sign-up sheet. Oh, I think we have one other. Nope, anyone else?
We also have some additional representatives.
Yeah, that's what.
It was hard to spot them. So
Okay, move on to board action, consent agenda, all approved. Okay, we're on to board votes. Approval of the IRS Form 990.
So moved.
Ginny moved.
Second.
Greg seconded. Any discussion? This was reviewed at the audit committee. Any questions? If not, all those in favor? Unanimous. Chow, are you around? Okay. Next up, resolution regarding Council Bill 70. Yep, the zoning. We have a resolution put before us. Is there a motion? Dick moved that we approve the resolution. Is there a second?
second.
Yeah.
Alan seconded. The second, wait a minute. Dick. Alan. Okay, questions, discussion. Ginny?
Actually, I'd like us to consider an amendment. If this zoning official is good enough for the county, and which they already have, and if it's good enough for downtown, I fail to see why it wouldn't also be helpful for all of Columbia in dealing with the planning board. Now, I know the response we got was that would be a killer, but the role of the CA board is not to decide what's politically possible, et cetera. It's more if this is what we think would be helpful to people that live in Columbia, all of Columbia, then we should tell a council member or the council as a whole that that's what we'd like. They can choose to, one, not put it in the bill, not amend the bill to do that, or if the sponsor decides to propose an amendment to amend the bill, they can choose to kill it. So, I mean, the ball would be in their court is what I'm saying. But if it's good enough for downtown, I think it's good enough for the villages as well. So that would be.
Well, yes, it would be, but we have, I think it is up to the county council to make that decision.
Right.
And we have a county council member who knows how to play that game and knows what the strategy is. And I think it's a little presumptuous of us to instruct the county council member on how she should proceed. Let's just stay out of that and let's get this piece of it done. And then if we think that it needs to be extended, we can take it from there.
By the way, I forgot, but I would like to recognize County Councilwoman Jen Teresa, who is here tonight. Okay, Alan was next, and then, sorry.
I guess I wouldn't mind, I'm not sure exactly what the wording would be, but it might be before there be a further resolve, but there's something that we recommend that the council explore extending this to all of Newtown zoning, something like that, for all of Columbia.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah, I was just going to say that I think this is a very good step, that it certainly offers more to our residents than they have had before. And I think we can see how this works, and on the basis of what I hope will be its success, then recommend a further extension of it. So I think it would be helpful to get this into place as it's written, I think there's good consensus for this.
Yeah.
Ginny.
In terms of whether we tell the county council what to do or not, we did this, we told the county what to do on this. We do that, I would assume this board does that all the time, so that doesn't really faze me. They do what they want anyway, it's just, this would be our opinion, and they listen to a lot of opinions. We're one other opinion, so I don't think that's prohibited. And the other thing, though, in terms of waiting, how much more development will occur in King's Contrivance or Owen Brown or Oakland Mills or Long Reach, blah, 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 where if this is such a great idea, this zoning official hasn't advised people as to what is really going on and what your rights are if we wait a couple of years. So, how long is it going to take to see whether it works downtown is my point. If it's a good idea, it should apply. It applies outside of Columbia, and it's been apparently a success, I assume, because that's why, that's what they're building this on. So it's been working out there, and people are getting advice on this. I don't see why we can't say, okay, all of Columbia.
Point of information, it's my understanding is the zoning council doesn't provide advice to people. The zoning council is there to
Information.
make sure that the process is followed and to make sure that to advocate for the current zone.
The record is complete. Make sure
Yeah,
the record is
it's information that perhaps, a group could hire a lawyer and get that, but this is another way of a group that says, I don't know if I want that in my neighborhood, or I think they're doing something wrong. This person would step in and get them information, and if it's,
Ginny, would you be comfortable if we approved this particular version of it with, say, an addendum, oh, by the way, we'd love to see this extended Columbia-wise?
Yeah, because what we're just simply,
But we would approve the approval of this.
Well, what we're simply saying to the whole council is what I just said. If it's good enough for one part, it's good enough for all, and if it's good enough for outside Columbia. So that's what we really would be saying. Same way, because we don't actually amend a bill anyway.
No, but we would say, we approve of this, we endorse it, and oh, by the way, it would be nice if it continued, or do you want
I would be
to
a
put that language
I would be a little stronger than that, because I would say we feel that this would be good for all of Columbia, or all of Newtown zoning, or all of Newtown land, zoning, zoned. Let's try that again. It's like Newtown zoned land, which unfortunately doesn't cover Dorsey Search.
Right, it doesn't cover
right?
Dorsey Search.
And it doesn't cover some of the employment areas, but anyway.
All right, any other discussion?
Who seconded the motion?
Alan did. Dick made the motion, Alan seconded. He got in before Greg.
For the resolution as written.
For the resolution as written.
Could you read that for me, please?
But I thought we were talking about an amendment or an addition to that.
That would be a
amendment
second.
maybe
Right,
too.
but at the moment, what I got asked was who made the.
Okay.
So what I have is
It's in the packet.
Dick moved and Alan seconded to approve the resolution as drafted by staff, and hopefully everyone has seen that.
Mhm.
That's what we have right now.
Okay, and I'm just suggesting that we consider an amendment that would say, we really would like you to consider an amendment or to this bill so that it extends to all of Columbia.
Just for the downtown.
The way Andy works is you have to make a motion to amend.
I thought I just did.
All right.
You said you'd like us to consider an amendment.
I make a motion that we amend, I don't want to use the word amend, but that we, amend the resolution to request the council to consider amending the bill to include all of Columbia.
Okay. Ginny made the motion for the amendment. Is there a second for the amendment?
Second, so we can discuss it.
Okay. Okay, discussion on the amendment.
Well, I have a
Yeah, Alan.
question for Ms. Tarasa. Do you think adding that amendment, suggesting if we also added to our statement that we would like the council to consider expanding the zoning council to all of Newtown zoning or all of Columbia, would that hurt, hinder, or make no difference to the chances of passage?
If you're talking about just suggesting that they look at it or consider that, I think that's up to you all.
Thank you.
Any
Yeah, I
further,
mean, they do what they want.
Yeah, really.
any further discussion on the amendment? If not, I'll call the question. All those in favor of the amendment? Okay, let me get this on. The amendment? So I have Alan, Ginny, Shari, Nancy. Let me write that down. All those opposed? Greg and Andy. All those abstained?
Where's Greg?
Oh, and Greg. Oh, Greg's right there.
Oh,
Greg's
okay.
right there.
Greg's sort of in the meeting. Not in the
I
meeting.
actually used the first one I saw.
He'd like to hit the
I was
rest.
gonna say, I'm looking over there and
Wait, give me a chance here. So, Greg, Dick, Andy, and
What happens when you miss a meeting?
Janet. All right, the amendment fails. Let's just go then with the resolution. All those in favor of the resolution as written. Greg, Janet, Alan, Sherry, Nancy, Dick, Andy. Opposed? Abstain. Okay. Chow, you're not there, are you? I don't know. All right. Thank you very much. All right. Next, we actually have an invited guest, Marsha McLaughlin, and I want to thank Marsha very much for coming tonight. And Jane, anything you want to add first, or?
And please welcome Marsha McLaughlin to the floor.
The return up.
Thanks, Marsha. Appreciate your coming out. I know it's not the greatest night
Not the greatest
to
night.
travel.
Especially
But,
coming from Baltimore.
yeah.
Kept some notes dry here. These notes are a little bit on the detailed side, but I figured it'll be late at night, and you'll remember some part of it, and maybe if you can look at it, you'll remember whatever your questions were. And hopefully this will be a discussion, not really me going on.
Yeah, I did tell Marsha the board was going to question her, so you better have some questions.
I don't think that's a problem.
No, I don't either. As I understand it, I have reviewed Clarion's report, which, as you know, has looked at all of the zoning in the county, all of the other development-related regulations, and I was very pleased to understand that they actually, the administration, Alan Kittleman, Val Lansdowne, have decided that dealing with Newtown zoning is a priority, and that's actually going to go forward sooner rather than later. I was concerned because there are so many issues. It's easy to kick the hard one down the road and start off with easy ones. So it's great that they're going to be getting started, and it's my understanding that while Jen is leaving us and we have a whole new council coming on board who knows not much about zoning, they're going to tackle this early in 2019. So there will be a lot for you all to consider as this moves forward. As you all know, in 1965, the original Newtown zoning was based on the preliminary development plan, and what I included in here as attachments, this I believe was probably put together by CA. This is Jane's map, which is, as you know, Columbia now, and it's much more easy to understand. I included two copies, the original 1965 PDP, which was in black and white and was never very easy to read.
it's a little easier to read at a large scale. We have a version hanging in the Planning and Zoning Department that's probably, I don't know, 5 by 6 feet. But it's still pretty fuzzy. And then included in the next page is a much more recent PDP. I don't think, this is as 2012, so it would not include any changes that have been made to the downtown. But the downtown changes are mostly in the regulations, not so much in what is shown in the map. Probably one of the main things to look at between the two of these, many of the changes that have occurred in the 50 years since Jim Rouse decided it would be a great idea to assemble 14,000 plus acres and turn it into a new community, is that the land use categories are all still the same. There's 2 categories, single family, low density, and medium density. There's apartments, there's employment center commercials, employment center industrials, and open space. And you can see the numbers of acres between the 2 plans have gone up as he completed the land assembly. Didn't have as much land in 65 as the current number. And the ratios of how much is in the various land uses has changed. The other key provision in the preliminary plan amendments that have occurred over time, besides adding land and making these shifts in land use, has been related to total density in Columbia.
Marcia?
Yes.
You said they went up, and maybe I'm just not following it fast enough. The first PDP,
shows
single density, single family low density, 2,500 acres. The newer one closer to 1,500 acres.
Maybe
That
I should
sounds like it went way down.
rephrase that. If you look at the bottom number under total acreage, the original PDP had 13,690 acres. We now have 14,272 acres. The ratios of how much are single-family, low and medium density compared to the other land uses has shifted over time. So you're correct. The original amount of single-family, low density was 18%, and now it's 10. Right? So again, Jim Rouse set this whole zoning up to give him maximum flexibility, knowing it was going to take time, markets would change, and I don't know enough about his original thinking as to why he picked the numbers that were in the original PDP. So it has evolved, obviously. I also included, because I want to talk about these pieces, there's the preliminary development plan, which gave him the ability to create the community. Then we go into final development plans, then we go into, well, actually comprehensive sketch plans and final development plans. And then you start the county process, which is subdivisions and site plans. So it's essentially a 5-step process in Newtown, which is a long, dragged-out process. It's complicated. If you look at the next couple of sheets, which are what the final development plan looks like, essentially, after the preliminary development plan was approved and they started developing, initially in Wild Lake, they would propose to the planning board the comprehensive sketch plan. The comprehensive sketch plan essentially looks exactly like the final development plan in the first 2 sheets, in that there'll be an original drawing that shows what parcels of land are involved. The next page then flips into, I apologize for the tiny print, the language about what would be allowed. These are essentially the zoning regulations for a particular area of Columbia. And while there's a lot of similarities between single-family low density across Columbia or employment commercial across Columbia, they evolved significantly over the 50-year history of Columbia. A lot of this, if you're looking at the tiny print, deals with setbacks and drainage issues and kind of design-related issues. Number 7, which is sort of in the top of the middle column, which is permitted uses. For I'm not sure what reason, because I wasn't here 50 years ago when this got set up, generally they refer to other zoning districts. And since this happens to be the Dobbin area and it's an employment industrial area, it refers to M1 zoning uses. And then it itemizes some other specific things, A through L, that are additional uses that would be allowed. What's odd is that, and what's difficult for most people is you think you have this listing of what can be allowed, but then it doesn't really tell you what's in M1. You have to go to the county zoning regulations to figure that out. So it's not a very transparent process. And what was in M1 50 years ago isn't necessarily what was in M1 today. So we've had lots of debates over time about, well, which set of uses is the M1 that's authorized by this? So that's just another loose, mushy issue.
Where did you come down on that?
I think we've tried to reflect the fact that the M1 zoning and all the other residential zonings, the commercial zonings, have all evolved. The markets have changed in some instances, so we tend to lean towards what's currently evolved. But ultimately, it's an interpretation by the planning board, and if we have testimony at a planning board meeting or hearing that wants to debate what's good for the community, there are other reasons why you can approve or not approve something.
Have there been any legal rulings on that?
There have been appeals of some decisions by the planning board. I don't know that any of them have gotten to the core of the issue of the evolution of any of the county zones. I mean, some of the zones that are mentioned in the FDPs don't even exist in the regulations anymore. They've been eliminated from the zoning regulations. Yes.
Jenny.
Thank you. My understanding was M1 is not the planning board, but it's DPZ.
Anything in Columbia that has like a site plan, once you've gotten to the point where it's got its comprehensive sketch plan done that identifies which properties are going to have which land use and the final development plan, then you start the county's process, which is you have to have either a subdivision and or a site plan. Those go to the planning board.
Is that true for residential and commercial?
It is, I don't believe if it's single family, it's been a long time since I've thought about this in this level of detail. Certainly apartments, all of the employment and commercial and industrial goes to the planning board if they have a site plan. If it's single family detached, it does not. Apartments would. And in Columbia, because of kind of the complexity of the regulations and kind of the goals of Columbia that Jim Rouse articulated, it was determined that the planning board needed to review all these. Most development in the county is not reviewed by the planning board. It's reviewed by an interagency panel, and based on the regulations and how they would be applied, the decisions are made by essentially the head of planning and zoning after listening to the agency comments, both county and state comments. Only in Columbia and then the mixed-use districts like Maple Lawn, because they're also similarly large mixed-use communities, those go to the planning board as well.
Jake?
Yeah, if the county in the process that they're going to undertake eliminates M1 as a category, what would happen to all these areas that have
That's
an
a
M1
very
zoning?
interesting question.
Say they come up with something that they think is more creative, that would allow for different, of more flexibility or something.
Well, and I think particularly because we're going into a situation where Clarion's recommendations are now being mulled over, and they're going to be making, I assume, major changes in the zoning regulations. I think one of the reasons that they wanted to start with Columbia was to see where Columbia wanted to go, and then ideally maybe the kinds of descriptions in the rules for Columbia don't reference you to another zoning district. They would itemize what really makes sense in these various land use categories for Columbia, and that would give them the flexibility if they want to drop M1, that they're not then leaving a big hole that's, a lot of questions for Newtown.
Alan?
Yeah. You mentioned comprehensive sketch plans in the present tense. My understanding is they were destroyed. So that sounds like
I will answer that question, but let me show you the last page. The main difference between the comprehensive sketch plan and the final development plan is that the final development plan is a survey document. This is only one part of that plan. I didn't want to bore you with more pages of survey drawings, but you can see it's got survey points all around it, and it's an engineered document that totally nails down exactly where this land is. The sketch plans, once the final development plan is adopted and they get recorded in the land records for the county, the sketch plan is just a preliminary step that's superfluous. And those drawings, when and I'm not sure who even made this decision a long time ago. Once the final development plan was recorded, that was the official document, and they, I think, didn't want to confuse people by the earlier history on the comprehensive sketch plan.
So if I understand what you're saying correctly, it's not that there were a bunch of comprehensive sketch plans around and somehow they disappeared. It's that all along comprehensive sketch plans have been discarded.
That's my understanding. Now, it may have been that they weren't discarded for the first 5 or 10 years, but long before I ever came, they decided that they were superfluous. And the goal was essentially to use the final development plans. And if anybody wants to redevelop something, then they have to come back and amend the final development plan if they want to change the land use designation or any of the rules.
Was there information in the sketch plans that did not get carried over to the final development plans?
I don't think so. I mean, what might have happened when the comprehensive sketch plan went to the planning board, maybe there was a debate about permitted uses, and they might have added or deleted a permitted use, and that would have been a decision ruled at the comprehensive sketch plan stage, and then would have been formalized in the version that went to the county records of the final development plan.
Well, if a final development plan is amended, is there any reference back to the comprehensive sketch plan?
You know, it's a successive process, so that if once the final development plan is amended, and actually this is an example that if you can again read the fine print here under the uses, this is the Dobbin area, and you'll notice that everything is typed except at the very bottom. There's one handwritten in the bottom in very tiny print, which says full service food and grocery store and related uses of 1,000 square feet or more, which is Wegmans. We had a lot of debate about Wegmans and whether Wegmans should be allowed. I really did not want Wegmans to go there because it was this ambiguous, you know, it's the scale of an industrial building, but it is clearly not an industrial building. It was the only place they wanted to go in Howard County, and they debated it. We debated it for 2 years, and we had so many people when this went to the planning board to decide, do we add, you know, warehouse-sized grocery stores in this particular FDP? There were people who were jumping up and down because they were tired of driving to Hunt Valley to go to Wegmans, and they wanted their own here. So, again, it's not a strict industrial use, and part of the issue is markets change, things evolve, and how do you allow Columbia, which has celebrated its 50th birthday, continue to evolve? So I think, in my opinion, trying to keep the vision for Columbia first and foremost in everybody's mind, but streamline the process would be a good goal for this new town regulation update. At this point in time, the preliminary development plan and the comprehensive sketch plans don't really have any meaning and can be archived. Columbia has wonderful archives, and I think, frankly, you could do a great exhibit on the history of how this all got planned. But the final development plans are what really are amended over time. About the only things that have gone recently back to the zoning board in terms of preliminary plan amendments have to do with upgrading the density that's allowed. They've slowly increased how much housing can occur. And again, if we're going to go through the zoning process, looking at density, what's the right density for Columbia in the future is something that could be incorporated into the zoning. And if that's the only real reason that you keep the preliminary development plan alive, that doesn't seem very useful.
Would roads go into the FTP?
Roads, as in public roads?
Yeah.
Yes, I mean, you can actually see on this one, I think this is Dobbin and Snowden River Parkway are both being shown on this drawing. If you look at the preliminary development plan that was adopted in '65, you can see their original ideas of where some roads were going to be don't look the same at all as the current version of the preliminary development plan. But most of the road infrastructure is pretty much in place at this point.
I can say that having reviewed employment center, commercial, and industrial FDPs, there are actually FDPs that are roads.
Yes.
You know, different parts of the roads are in different FDPs, but they're all there somewhere. Yeah, it's interesting. Marcia, do you have anything else? Or, oh, Greg, sorry.
I think Alan has. Yeah.
Alan, I'm sorry.
Speaking of that FDP, you were pointing us to section 7 there. That word ancillary, my understanding is for a long time, ancillary meant ancillary to the main use that the property was being put to. Main industrial use, like we have a maintenance facility, we need gas for our maintenance trucks, so we could put some gas stations in there. Somewhere along the lines, it seems like that meaning has changed, so we had the whole Royal Farm debate that's been going on, is continuing to go on, whether those are ancillary, what's your understanding of that meaning and that history?
Clearly, in this one, you can see that they list gasoline service stations as being part of what's allowed.
Allowed if they're ancillary to the main use.
Not here, not in this one. This one, look at D.
I see it's listed here, but it says commercial uses ancillary to
you're right.
are permitted.
He's right.
But they're permitted if they are ancillary to this main use.
Well, and I guess the interpretation of that is ancillary. What's ancillary to a gas station at this point? How many gas?
What is a gas station ancillary to?
Well, see, I think that these have been interpreted as being things that, if you've got an industrial park, does it make sense that there would be a place that you could have a restaurant where employees could grab something to eat? Does it make sense that there would be some kind of gas function? These are all things that are allowed in M1 as by right uses. I'm not quite sure what the history was as why they started to pull some of these out as ancillary.
Is by right a term applicable to new town zoning?
Thank you. I can't answer that the way a lawyer would answer that. I think that the issue is, if it's allowed by right in the M1, it would be allowed by right in the employment industrial for Columbia, unless there was specific language that prohibited something. And then when it comes to things like ancillary, for example, with the gas station on Snowden River Parkway, gas stations these days most often now are associated with some kind of convenience. They often have car washes. So, you don't see just an old-fashioned gas station very often anymore. So, do you freeze a term the way it might have been conceived 50 years ago, or do you assume that markets evolve and you try and understand current trends? I don't know that there's a right or a wrong, but that's the kind of thing that needs to be clarified as you're going into updating the regulations, because what's acceptable now may not be acceptable in 10, let alone 50 years.
Ginny and then Cherry.
Were you, Greg? You were.
I'm sorry, Greg. I'm
sorry, Greg.
My fault, Greg.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks for coming in. My question is that on the comprehensive sketch plans, I guess it's water under the bridge, over the dam, whatever at this point. But
Interproudfoot Pond.
Just a stream.
Right. But my understanding was that you say FDPs are it, so we don't. The comprehensive sketch plans are superfluous. But my understanding was that if you wanted to amend a FDP, you had to establish that it was consistent with the underlying comprehensive sketch plan. And now that the comprehensive sketch plans are gone, there's no way that the person proposing the amendment to the FDP can show that consistency, and so it's just not, essentially it's not required anymore, as I understand it. So you sort of lost that part of the chain that used to be there in order to amend the FDP.
It's just that the comprehensive sketch plan gets amended based on the planning board's decision, and then it gets copied and put into the final development plan. If you really wanted to go back and understand the debate that might have happened at a planning board about whether something was or wasn't included, you can go back to the planning board minutes and look at what level of notes were taken about that particular topic, to the extent that they were actually recorded in the minutes. But the comprehensive sketch plan, once there's been a decision made on it, will be modified if there's a planning board rules one way or the other. And so it's going to look just like the final development plan, but it won't have the survey.
My question is, though,
okay.
Amendments to the final amendments to the FDP.
Yes.
My understanding was that that would ordinarily require a showing that the amendment to the FDP is consistent with the comprehensive sketch plan. And now that's no longer possible to show that consistency with the underlying comprehensive sketch plan one way or another because those plans are gone. That's my point.
Yeah, I understand what you're saying. I think that I'd have to go back and look at the language in terms of consistency with a comprehensive sketch plan because, as I said, they get modified, anything that's changed by the planning board's decision. So essentially they're identical documents, but for the detailed survey work. I mean, I think that what we tend to look at is consistency with, the concepts for each of the land uses. And if somebody is proposing something that's wildly different for a land use, then, sometimes we've gone back and we've had to go to the zoning board for something. But
as I've said, it's, I guess,
Ginny's next.
Yeah.
And then Shari, and then now.
I'm just going to try something on you that deals with permitted or a matter of right and see what you think. Because it seems like it's different in Columbia than other areas. For example, on Broken Land Parkway, Lakeview property, across from the lake, Lakeview Development, they want to put a retail part. My understanding is it's zone B1.
it's employment commercial, right?
Which would allow, right. So the point is, some people are saying it's a permitted use, other people are saying it's a matter of right. Is it true that because it's B1, what they want to do, which is a fast food restaurant, say, and some other retail stores, it's permitted, but it can't really become a matter of right until Howard Hughes approves, or HRD, whichever, the actual covenant approval that they say it's okay. In other words, the developer can go through the county and get complete approval, say, or they can go to Howard Hughes first and get approval, but they actually are not going to be able to build till they get both.
You're right, and I get to covenants later and all in this.
So it becomes a matter of right after you get both, and you can choose as a developer. The county could care less about whether you get covenant approval because they're just interested in the zoning. And you could get approval from the county, but you're not going to really be, you're at risk if you start to build.
And most developers would go to HRD first, because if HRD won't give you the latitude, because even though you may be able to, and under any of these, have anything in B1 or anything in M1, they, wanted to maintain control, and they would sell at a higher price for certain uses. And so, they're not going to sell you at a warehouse price something for, a retail facility.
So here's my conclusion, or I'm asking you a question. If this board wanted to influence the way that development is going to be built, our best bet is to go to Howard Hughes with some suggestions for conditions on that. Landscaping, maybe move the building here, whatever. That's what we should be spending our time doing right now.
Well, the covenants are difficult, and I'll jump to covenants because that's where we are. Jim Rouse wanted to maintain control. He had a vision for what he wanted to see, but he also knew that there were tough times, and he almost lost control at a certain point. So HRD is the subsidiary of the Rouse Company, and they basically put covenants on all of the commercial and industrial properties. I believe they have, covenants on apartments, and I don't really know enough about the covenants for single family. I think those are mostly administered through the Columbia Association, and they're much more related to somebody modifying their house, an addition, or color of their front door, or whatever. But those covenants are private covenants. The county does not have anything to do with them. They get recorded in the land records, and if for example, HRD had said, no, you cannot have fast food on a particular piece of property, and then they agreed later on for the right price that was okay, then the covenants would have to be modified to let him do that. Most of that property has been sold now, and there's very little that HRD, as the subsidiary of Howard Hughes, still owns. They may have some degree of latitude in terms of controlling uses, but it becomes a big battle. And there's a lot of responsibility that they have for enforcing design covenants, landscaping, signage covenants, that it's work that doesn't generate any revenue for them, and they would like to be free of. And I think it's my understanding that Howard Hughes is very much interested in exploring getting out of the covenants, both in terms of their responsibilities for design control and signage control, in exchange for maybe giving up any remaining control they have over the uses for particular parcels.
Some places.
That's the point that I wanted you to clarify. You said Howard Hughes wanted, or HRD wanted to get out of the covenants business, but only they didn't want to do. It's my understanding that they do not want to relinquish the land use covenants.
I haven't had recent conversations with them, and it's one of those things like it's sure you want your cake and eat it too, but if they want to be free of the responsibilities for, you know, reviewing signs and somebody's going to change the color of the roof on the whatever commercial or industrial building, they don't care about that, and so there has to be an incentive for them to want to get out of the covenants. And unwinding the covenants is going to be difficult, and it isn't done through the zoning process. So, you know, even if the zoning can get modified the way everybody feels like it ought to go, then the question really is, you know, how do you put some pressure on Howard Hughes to try and unwind some of the covenants?
Sure.
Yeah, you just gave us a whole lot of stuff to think about. But I had written down a couple of questions. Looking on the Howard County government site, I was explaining the process. So I guess this is a question about process. I need to flip us back to that. But it seemed to say that there is a public hearing for a comprehensive sketch plan.
Mm-hmm.
Is that correct?
Yes.
Is that just for Newtown?
Well, we don't have comprehensive sketch plans anywhere but Newtown.
Okay. And does that include industrial?
Yes.
M1?
Yes. Well, not M1. It's the employment industrial in Newtown. If you're on Route 1 and you've got an M1 site, no.
Okay, so obviously Route 1 is not Columbia.
Right.
But I'm trying to get the distinction between residential and industrial.
Well, again, they would come in initially with the comprehensive sketch plan for the geography, and they would show, you know, the roads, the parcels that they wanted to develop. They would make a designation as to whether it was single-family low density, single-family medium density, and they may have some specific things that would be enumerated in terms of auxiliary uses that you could have associated with your home. And then that gets recorded as an FDP, and then that becomes essentially the zoning document that triggers them being able to move forward with subdivision of the land and creating the homes.
Okay, because the other thing that followed this little discussion said if plan borders property not in Newtown District, that there also is a public hearing.
There wouldn't be a public hearing because the planning board doesn't consider land that is not Newtown zoned.
So that's not correct.
That's not correct. There would be a public hearing if there was a rezoning, but that public hearing would be in front of the council acting as the zoning board. Say there was an R20. A lot of the out parcels, you know, in Columbia are R20. Say somebody wanted to upzone it so they could do townhouses. That would go to the zoning board and you'd have a hearing.
So I guess what I'm trying to get at is right now there's so much attention on infill.
Mm-hmm.
So we've got not Columbia right up against Newtown, and that's what I was going through and seeing. Well, if you are in this contiguous situation, do you need to have a public hearing in terms of establishing that whatever is going into not Columbia matches somehow what has already been established as far as design, as far as building heights, as far, you know, matching the community?
That is nothing that is in the regulations now. That's again
It's not
something
in the
something in the
regulations.
notes further down about how you deal with out parcels, because there certainly could be, whether there was a public hearing or whether there would be some standard criteria that you could actually add when the zoning for R20 or the mostly residential neighborhoods will be R20 is out parcels. you could certainly put in there something that says when contiguous with Columbia, it must be, whether it's a setback or a landscape buffer or some kind of height comparability. You could put those kinds of things in regulations.
Thank you.
Allison.
So, one of my concerns as we think about redoing all this are sort of the unintended consequences. You know, they say problems are always solutions to a previous problem that somebody thought was a good idea, as are some of the problems we have with new town zoning now. So I want to both understand the current, but also try to learn some lessons from it. So you said two very interesting things to me that are interesting to me that you said here. One was your original concerns about Wegmans being where it was, and the other is the role of the planning board. So I want to ask a couple things about that. Back, if you'll recall, when half my job was to be a thorn in your side during the downtown development stuff.
Half your job?
I remember talking to Bill Mackey, and I asked him, I said, it seems, and part of it was my concern about, like, Snowden and all the proliferation of retail things that were in nobody's village, but had to be in a village somewhere, because theoretically there are boundaries, but they were sucking the life out of our village centers and so on. At least that's my soapbox.
Longreach in particular has had trouble with it.
But I think it's, I mean, you know, like there used to be a hardware store in Wild Lake after Heckinger's opened, and also no more hardware store in Wild Lake. So I asked Bill, I said, you know, it seems to me that if somebody wants to build something and it fits with the letter of the law, the way the county is approaching it, they get to build it. And he said, yeah, that's the way it is. My thought or hope, I don't know which, was that somehow the planning board, vis-a-vis Newtown, had a little more of an elevated purpose. It wasn't just did it meet the letter of the law, but did it meet the spirit of the plan or the spirit of the underlying. So A, was I totally screwed up about that is question one. And question two is, you seem to be saying that the planning board only has to do with Newtown and doesn't have anything to do with the rest of the county, which is sort of new to me because I've always thought we ought to have a Columbia planning board. And maybe we already do, I don't know.
Well, Columbia, the planning board makes recommendations to the council on major zoning changes.
Countywide,
all all categories of uses, but they really don't review, site plans, and because they don't exist, there are no federal development plans or comprehensive sketch plans in other parts of the county. So they're not involved, other than in the mixed use districts like Maple Lawn. They don't do that kind of review. And I think going to the first point that you made about how tightly, and this is a question that you all will want to weigh a lot as we're thinking about revising the zoning regulations. 50 years ago, what was appropriate was a little tiny grocery store in Wild Lake. And almost all of the villages have had their little tiny grocery stores expanded some. But most of them didn't get anywhere near the size of what conventional grocery stores are these days. I mean, Dorsey Search is doing a whole lot better because it started as a new district, and by the time we got to Dorsey Search, grocery stores had gotten that big. So the little tiny hardware store, I mean, there aren't a lot of little tiny hardware stores left many places anymore. So retail markets probably change more than others. Industrial markets are also changing. As we look forward, mixed use is probably a direction that we're going to see more of rather than less. And so trying to, how tightly do you hang on to 50-year-old regulations? When do you decide, something is now the norm, the market, and you accommodate for it? And, along Snowden, there's some very large, big box type stores because they all want to be in Columbia. It's a great market, and there's really no place to put them. They didn't fit into the village centers. Where else do they go?
But there was also no overall planning like there is in Columbia to make what makes sense and what's going to be the impact. And
Right.
and so on. So that's
So, and we may have made mistakes along that count, and I think that again, that's an important thing to be thinking about as you're thinking about how these regulations get changed. How many of you have actually read Clarion's description of the new town zoning and kind of what the options are? You should all read it. It's pretty short, and they basically come down to two basic options that you basically either are going to be.
Could you just,
Yeah.
somewhere in there, I either missed it or didn't get a chance to hear the answer. Does the planning board currently have purview to say, yeah, it may fit with all the letter of the law, but it doesn't fit with the spirit of?
Yes, they could do that. They would have to have, and we have, the Office of Law will attend planning board hearings, particularly when there's items that are, legally debatable and they're looking for some advice. And I think they would just want to make sure that if the planning board started to say no, 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 that it was defensible from a legal standpoint.
The legal could be about the plan, not about the letter of the law.
Yes, and I think, the plan, there really needs to be some further planning for some parts of Columbia. I mean, we have passed amendments to the zoning that deals with downtown and with the village centers. We've had some experience with the village centers. One of the questions to you is, how's it going with the village centers? It's been a long time. Long Reach is still incubating. Hickory Ridge is now in suspended animation until the elections. So it's not a quick process. There are not a lot of developers that want to spend years thinking about where the zoning's going to go. So doing some planning around some of the village centers that you think are most challenged, so you've got a little bit of a game plan, makes it easier for somebody to come in and say, yeah, I'm ready to do that. And then you don't end up with a long process where there's a lot of community debate about whether they want more apartments or no apartments or some other use combo.
So you
I
want to
just was going to say real quick about Clarion.
Yeah.
They're basically saying that Newtown needs revamping, and there's basically two ways to go. That you can think about revamping and focusing on what uses are permitted in different land uses, or you could focus on design, and you could have design criteria and not be so rigid about is it M1, is it B1, is it apartments, and there's merits to both. There are certainly some places that are much more design-oriented, and I'm not at all opposed to design-oriented approach. I think what's difficult about Columbia is you have 100,000 people that live here, and you have a large number of businesses. And when you start to tell people, we're going to change your zoning, and you used to think you were single-family, low-density, but now we're going to make you something with somewhat flexible design standards as the way we describe your neighborhood, it makes people nervous. And so I guess my sense is it's your call after you've debated it, but I think it's a lot easier to work on what kind of uses are permitted in single-family low density or in apartments or in the employment two categories. You may want to add a seventh category. You might want to add a mixed-use district, because there really isn't a mixed-use district now other than what we sort of put together for downtown and for the villages. But there may be other places where some mixing of uses, like what you're describing for Lakeview, is really kind of more of a mixed-use concept than a straight office project. You're going to see it with Gateway. Gateway is not Newtown zoned. It's in M1 zone. The covenants are coming off. They're going to take a number of years to come off, but those covenants are expiring. And when it was bought, those old GE gigantic warehouse buildings, they were very clear about their goal was to take it all down and go mixed use. And they will have to go through a zoning process to get there, but that's kind of where the market is going at this point in time. Millennials want to be in downtown in a more urban place, and suburban office parks are kind of passé.
Dick's next.
I have two questions. The first one is you say that, Clarion says there are two ways to go, design or use. Is there any reason why you can't do both?
I think you can do both. I think it's partly going to be trying to help 100,000 people in Columbia feel comfortable with the zoning change and where the emphasis is. Because I think most people do want to have good quality design. I think that's was always part of Jim Rouse's vision. It wasn't going to just be, you know, a better suburb. It was going to be a true city. It was going to be more urban, but it was going to be high quality, well designed. So I do think you can. It's really more of a question of framing the discussion in a way that people feel like they can hang on to their single-family low density or single-family medium density is kind of something they understand, that's straightforward, and the design issues are kind of a
My other question, I've been told that a few years back you were looking at amending Newtown zoning, and somehow it didn't ever go anywhere. I was wondering, is that true? And if so, what ideas did you have at that time? And finally, why didn't it go through?
Well, I was very much involved with amendments related to village centers and for downtown when I was still working for Howard County. When I retired, I did a little work with Ginny over in Owings Mills, looking at
Oakland Mills.
Oakland Mills, sorry. Sorry, not Owings Mills.
Slade.
Oakland Mills. Looking at, again, how could that get jump-started? It's worked very well for Wild Lake because the developer was interested in being able to add apartments and make changes and bring back some vitality to the center. I'm not sure everybody in Wild Lake is happy with Wild Lake either, but at least there was somebody who was motivated and, you know, had control of the property to do something. I don't know that Kimco has been as successful in the discussions about Hickory Ridge. So, I mean, Ginny maybe could answer with Oakland Mills. I think partly it was that there wasn't a developer who was pushing to do anything. And when I left, you know, they brought in a new planning director, Val Lastens, and he was very much interested in having Clarion, who's a very well-recognized consultant, who's done work all over the country, come in and have fresh eyes looking. And I don't think he really wanted to jump into trying to make the regulations for village center redevelopment somewhat more flexible. So I think it just got kicked down the road, and I think now is the time that would be a possibility to raise those issues.
So Ginny has and then Sharon.
Two quick areas. One is the village center, and the other is to follow up on what Sherry was saying about infill. With the village center, right now under the current Newtown zoning, you have percentages. So what I'm trying to figure out is if we don't change the Newtown percentage thing and everything, how are we going to reinvent places like Oakland Mills to allow for more flexibility that'll, last us the next 40 years or 50 years? Because like residential alone, you got a cap or a certain number of residents that you can have. Where are we going to get the approval for residential development in Oakland Mills?
We don't.
So that's the first question. Then I'll get to the second one.
Well, if you look at other areas of the county, I mean, it's not like we have a residential zoning cap for all R20. I mean, R20 is probably the largest single-family, category of acreage we have. But we don't have a cap. There's so much that's allowed by geography, and so I think if
you have a percentage.
It's based on acreage. It's based on acreage.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so I think if you wanted to have more density in village centers, you could craft that it was allowed by right based on a certain density as long as it met certain design standards or something like that. I think you could craft it in a way that it didn't have to be raised as an increase for the entire Columbia. It's like when they've wanted to raise density for all of Columbia, then they have to come in and they have to make an amendment to the PDP for 14,000 acres when all they care about is this piece of ground. And that's not how, if somebody wanted to upzone their property anywhere else besides Columbia, they just come in and they ask the zoning board, can I have more density here?
Okay, I thought the percentage was a cap and you wouldn't be able to get additional residential development in.
Well, that's the way the regulations are written now, but they don't.
That's what I'm saying.
They don't
yeah.
have to be written that way.
Okay, that's what I'm saying. Right now
there's
our
a
hands
cap.
are tied. I'm not saying that's a good idea to have it, but if that was a proposal, Okay, so.
It just, again, if you have to go back to the zoning board and ask for more density for a village center development that everybody in the village center seems enthused about, it's just another 6 or 9 month process that you're adding on to something that says you do that first, then you do the comprehensive sketch plan, then you do the final development plan, and then you think about bringing in actual drawings to do the project.
Okay, the second question deals with infill. An example of that right now is the Jordan property, which is off Diamondback, I don't know if you all know where Mellenbrook is. All of Thunderhill is single-family detached. Dalton is single-family detached, which is an out parcel. Guilford Downs is single-family. So that, for better or worse, that's the way that area was created. The developer of 5 acres in Dalton, which is right in back of Mellenbrook, wants to do, or has a legal right to 5 acres for 10 lots. But no, they got this category 55 plus. I know we disagree a little on that, but 55 plus, and he wanted 21 townhouses. Now they're already flooding in that area. I'm literally 29. 3 lanes was flooded, half of Diamondback was flooded, and there's a lake right there. But okay. He's now trying to make a compromise where he'll do 16 attached homes instead of 21, and 5 single family that'll border the Columbia Mellenbrook homes. He sees that as compromise because the road going into it is right in back, right adjacent to the yards in Columbia. So that's not compatible at all. Your point was what's compatible. I'm not saying it's horrible. I'm saying it's not compatible. But
Has he applied for his conditional use? Because the only way he could do that, I believe, would be to seek a conditional use for age-restricted.
Well, he hasn't done it yet, but that was his intent. Then he withdrew when the community came out, and now he's back again with the compromise. Instead of 21 attached homes, it would be, and a community thing, it would be 16 attached and 5. But my point is, the loophole is the 55 plus that's allowing a developer a lot more density because it's serving a great need, And the same with the other one that the council member that just left told me this new category is not enforceable. She sent it to me in writing, is community enhancement, which is what Eric said. It's not enforceable category. So how do we look at those things that are giving developers a lot more than they'd normally be entitled to by saying, oh, it's meeting a community need?
Well,
I don't know.
There are several things that could be done. One is just as the review of the zoning occurs, the language that authorizes the conditional use for age-restricted adult housing or other kinds of like continuing care facilities, those kinds of things like Erickson, that could be looked at from the standpoint of raising the bar in terms of criteria that maybe aren't in there that you think ought to be in there, or specifically in terms of if it's adjacent to single family, there has to be some reasonable setback or compatibility.
Need. Say my last point. Need could be a category. We have to establish the need. Okay, thanks.
Sorry.
Yeah, thank you. I'm going to go back to the village center and the question of establishing districts, because when we looked at the Clarion material that was presented, the idea of establishing different kinds of districts. Could the village centers be village center districts?
I don't see why not.
Okay, so that's a different kind of concept, but that would fit under that.
Right. I mean, that's really what happens for downtown. We have a downtown district.
Okay. All right. So that follows that same kind of pattern, and there could be specific regulations and restrictions built in to preserve, for example, villages. To prohibit big box or whatever. That could be part of what is written in as part of that district.
I think things can be both prohibited and things can be permitted, and I think the tricky part is that issue of market. You're probably not going to get big boxes in village centers because, frankly, the village centers for the most part have really poor visibility. It was a great concept.
They have contiguous land.
Yes.
They do have contiguous land, and some of that is not Columbia. So that becomes an important consideration. The other question that I had was about how you incorporate historical buildings. So the taking down of historical buildings, I'm still confused about that. Who makes that decision? Is it the planning board? Is it DPZ? Is it the owner's discretion?
Depends on what it's designated. If it is an old building but doesn't have an official either state or federal designation as a historic structure, we don't really have any authority to prevent demolition. So
So it has to
tear
be
it down and
state
dig
or
something.
federal?
State or federal. We don't have a local list. The taking down of ones that are on their landmark is usually kind of a tough battle. I mean, have you had landmark structures, either state or federal landmark structures in Newtown or on, out parcels that have been taken down? I think what often happens that's more, in some ways, sadder is, and it hasn't so much happened in Columbia, but there have been a lot of places where they've saved the historic structure, but the zoning, which was put in place a long time ago, never really reflected that. And so what you end up with is a subdivision that wraps around and, it doesn't really convey any kind of setting that's appropriate for the historic structure that's saved. Fortunately, in Columbia, you have so much open space that many of the historic buildings that you have, like Oakland, have a nice setting.
Well, I was thinking specifically, for example, and most of you have been to the King's Contrivance restaurant.
Oh, yeah.
Great place. But, so it's situated right in the middle. I often have to tell people where it's located because they're driving and trying to find where it is. Right in the middle of single-family homes. If for some reason, and I hope this never happens, but if for some reason that restaurant sold, there is a historical building there that I don't know that has any kind of designation. But if it did not have a state or federal designation, could the new owner take it down and do whatever he wanted with that?
Or she.
Mm-hmm. He or she. Thank you.
I'm trying to remember, is that Newtown zoned or is it not Newtown zoned?
I don't know.
I think it might be because there have been alterations to it over time that I think went to the planning board.
I believe that it's Newtown zone,
Yeah.
and there is a specific set of covenants that applies to that
So that
property.
those
the
covenants
King's
might not
Contrivance
allow
restaurant.
tear down, they
The
might allow
covenants might not allow
modifications.
Okay, so the real challenge there, is it Newtown or isn't it? Because
pretty
it would
sure
be
it is.
different.
I think it's Newtown too. I
Okay.
think it's
You
Newtown.
wouldn't have covenants applying to you if it wasn't Newtown.
Okay. All right, but I think there may be other buildings, I'm just thinking of that particular one, but there may be other buildings, and there are older historical communities like Guilford, which was historically an African-American community with a lot, going on there, and so much of that has been lost because there has not been state or federal designation for buildings and things of that kind. So that's another thing we really should be thinking about, that if we're going to preserve our 50 years, we ought to be looking at other things.
Dorsey Search, Dick, the mansion there, it's now a lawyer's office, but there's a whole building, employment center around it.
It's become an office center, really.
Yeah.
And it's kind of
Beautiful.
the keystone to the
But the
overall
whole
center.
around it is
and
all.
it works. It works.
It's all
But that's not Newtown, right?
Not technically.
I don't think it is.
No, I don't think that part of Dorsey.
Dorsey's not Newtown. That's
Okay, great.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I just want to pick up on the village center thing. Honest to God, for me, that is the most important part of this. I'm not worried about our residential areas, right? They're going to stay residential. I'm not really worried about our office buildings. They're going to be there. But to me, when you say you think, and this is just, I see why you're saying it, but this is one of the things that really worries me, that mixed use is the way we're going. It's the way the market is going. To me, mixed use is one of the biggest threats to our village centers that we got going in Columbia. When you allow industrial areas like off of Snowden or let's say Gateway to all of a sudden become mixed use, then you're pulling people away from our village centers who would go to retail there. You're now giving them another option. And it just reminds me of Rouse's, his quote of this irrational process of just putting things wherever they go with no real plan. And so that's my concern about saying mixed use, because I don't buy into this idea that's where the market's going. Because I think that's where it's cheap to build. And the market goes in some respects where you want it to go. If we in Columbia, through this planning process, say we want the market to go, a certain portion of it to go to our village centers, we should be able to do that.
I think that's a very good point. And one of the concerns I've had about Gateway is that there needs to be a game plan for that before it gets all zoned. Because I don't want it to be, particularly with downtown. Exactly. I want downtown to be the urban center. Now, Gateway could probably be some other variation with some mix of uses. One of the difficult things about Gateway is if you want to have lunch, there's no place to even have lunch. You got to get in your car and drive someplace to get a lunch. So maybe mixed use for Gateway is more small scale retail, not big box, not grocery stores, but it's small scale that really caters to that population.
Like ancillary, yeah.
Ancillary. and would it frankly be so terrible if there was some ancillary apartments? I mean, one of the things that is a challenge in Howard County is we have been very big about trying to protect some of the West from not being totally turned into single-family subdivisions. So there's very tight growth boundaries, and we've pretty much built out everything in the growth boundary. And other than downtown and Route 1, there's not a lot of place to put much. And so as Columbia continues to attract people and businesses, where is it going to grow? And that's a question that everybody needs to decide on. And there's at least a lot of possibility with village centers. I'd rather see it go into village centers in downtown to start with. But if we need something else, you really don't want to see developers buying up single-family homes and bulldozing those and converting them. You'd be better off changing some of the older industrial parks.
So my question to you, I agree with all you just said. That was fantastic. The question to you is could you give us some suggestions as we go through this process to emphasize the continued primacy of the village center concept? Now, there may be some differences. Fine, we can see apartments. I personally like Wild Lake. I personally favor the Hickory Ridge plan. But either way, both of those plans maintain this idea of a village center. So again, could you give us some suggestions, maybe not tonight, but just at some point, on what we can do through this process to continue that part of the Columbia plan?
Okay. I think that that's an important part of this, because I do think that making it easier for the village centers to evolve in a way that's appropriate, but to do it in a streamlined process to encourage that to happen would be very helpful. Let's see what else we have.
Greg, Alan is next.
I think there's actually a question that needs, before we decide where Columbia or Howard County should go, the question is, do we want it to?
I work with organizations, and there are people who say,
if you're not growing, you're dying, and there are those of us who say that's not necessarily true. There's a good size, a good fit, and it works. And if you grow too big, it destroys the essence of what you are.
Can I just respond briefly to that?
Sure.
I'm a big believer that we have way too many people on this planet, and I'm into population control. However, there are a lot of people who don't agree with me, and
I'm not one of the ones who just
this is a place where people want to be. Between the market and job market in Howard County and the Baltimore-Washington corridor, they don't want to go to Garrett County. They don't really want to go to Dorchester. This is where people want to be. And if you cut off the development, and back before we started the adequate public facilities ordinance, we were doing 3,800 units a year, which led Liz Bobo to get APFO going. And they cut it back down to 2,500 units a year, and then to about 1,250, I think. So we've been doing this in terms of how many units a year, but the prices then just go up. Less units, more demand, and so does Columbia stay someplace that's socially and economically diverse, or do we just become?
I get that, and those are some of the things we need to trade off. I want to second what you said, Greg, because
if Rouse had done what the market wanted in 1963, we wouldn't have Columbia, because what the market wanted, sprawl, the market wanted all these things that Columbia was not in favor of. So I'm not sure I go so far as to say one can move the market where one wants, but one can take both a principled and a knowledgeable stand and say this is, and build a better product and people will come. One final, you talked about state and federal historical designations. Is there anything in law that you're aware of, that stops the county from adopting such a designation?
No, and we have, if you want to reach out and find out where the historic sites are in Columbia, the planning office has staff, and they have continually over time added more sites. Normally, if you just have a locally designated site, it doesn't have any teeth, in terms of regulations, and you don't get tax credits. The big advantage is there's some tax credits associated with renovating, and so that's why we tend to push the better ones to go to state or federal, but there could be local designations. It's just, then what does that mean? Could be just a demolition prohibition, but maybe also tax incentives of some kind would be helpful.
That are county related. Thank you.
I guess it's not, I don't know whether you can respond if you have my biggest concern, I was listening to Alan, it's not so much, I'm the newcomer. I've been here a little over 4.5 years, but I have lived and worked in six communities. My concern is that growth, 100,000, a little over 100,000, that's not a bad number. My thing about Columbia is that it needs to be fresh. It's looking like a 50-year-old community.
Mm-hmm.
I look at the single-family housing stock here. It's getting old and it looks sad.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's my biggest concern, is that we never should forget where we are. We're in a metropolitan area, or even a mega, whatever they call it, when you talk factor in DC, people have options. I don't care how much we talk about Columbia's greatness passes, people have options, and they can pass us by.
Well, and sort of related to that, you all know much more about the residential covenants than I do, because the county hasn't had anything to do with those. People make jokes about door colors and things like that. But if somebody wanted to buy a lot in Columbia and they wanted to tear it down, I mean, there's a lot of tear down and replacement in Montgomery County, because people want larger, fancier houses that have more things than the houses that were built in the 60s and 70s do. What would the covenant advisors do if Andy wanted to tear his house down and build something twice as big?
Actually, some of the villages have actually already come up with guidelines on that kind of redevelopment, and essentially you have to go through a process similar to the exterior alteration application process, where you have to get the village to bless the new structure before you can tear down the old one and build them.
And how hard that is or how easy that is, I don't know. I mean, that sort of comes back to refreshing and compatibility with the neighborhood. These are tough issues. I wanted to just go through, because it's getting late here, and your guys are all very patient. We talked a little bit about, at least in my humble opinion, the preliminary development plan and the final development plan really could be archived. And I think that even though the final development plan is the repository for whatever guidance we get about permitted uses and design standards, it could also be converted, and I think that's what Clarion is really saying. Instead of having 264 variations of these final development plans, which all reflect different language depending on the history of when they were recorded, even if you keep the same 6 land uses, or if you add a village center land use as a 7th category, those could all be very well defined, and it would be so much easier for people, because you could just go into the zoning and look and see what was permitted, and not have to try and figure out what M1 is, or ancillary uses, or something that's much more straightforward. And I think that's what Clarion is really hoping. We talked a little bit about design standards and covenants. I don't know that that's anything that can be really done through the zoning process, but I would encourage the board to have conversations with Howard Hughes about how that might get unwound. And again, the county has responsibility elsewhere for landscape standards and sign regulations and things, and so the county could certainly take over those functions for Howard Research and Development if that was the price to be paid for them perhaps being more flexible on the relinquishing their covenants. We talked about Village Center revitalization. We talked a little bit about employment and commercial and industrial areas evolving. How do people feel about apartments? I mean, I think the single-family neighborhoods, other than Milton wanting to tear down his house and making it twice as big, or maybe adding both of them.
Not his house. His house is nice.
Not twice as big, just refresh it. I'm not looking for a McMahon. Just make it look.
But for the most part, the single-family neighborhoods, I think, will be pretty stable. People may put additions on, and they may use new materials and all those kinds of things. It's the apartments that I think sometimes get older. I know that we've looked at a little bit in Oakland Mills when the county's Department of Housing and Community Development bought Verona Apartments. There was a lot of because they had been successful with taking down some very old apartment projects in Ellicott City and also the one on Oakland Mills Road that they doubled the density, but they made them new and they were mixed income in a much more sustainable way. They had enough rent coming in that they could actually keep the buildings up, whereas when they're old and the rents are all low, whether they're officially subsidized or whether they're just lower rate, market rate apartments because they're older, at some point in time, they don't get kept up as well. So having some flexibility for apartments to refresh themselves is probably also something to think about.
Sure.
I was going to say, one of the things that we don't have in Columbia, and I don't know that we have any regulations about it, but I've certainly seen in older cities that I've lived in, is the conversion of single families to duplexes. And what that does, especially for an aging population, is it creates the possibility of creating a rental property which sustains the ability to remain in your home.
We do get the ability for ancillary apartments.
Ancillary?
Yeah.
I think
I have one in my basement as an
yeah,
official
but
apartment.
it's still, you know, if you think of the Midwest, where you build up but one story, or you convert a two-story house by putting up a wall and creating an entrance, and then you have two. That is sort of a way of easing into density that doesn't destroy the look and feel of a neighborhood, nor does it put a huge number of extra cars on roads that cannot be, expanded in most cases. So that's another thing that that might be a possibility that would work.
And the county has regulations that allow that to happen. There are a lot of things that happen outside Newtown that are done by conditional use, that if you meet the conditions, you can do it. And so there are some limitations on, again, how big it can get, whether it's owner occupied as opposed to it just being turned into something that's, totally rental. There are criteria, but that's something that could be looked at, and if it was something that you felt was appropriate, it could be included in the Newtown regulations.
Right.
Yeah, Marshall, on the apartments issue, I'm just trying to understand what the issue there is. I mean, I agree with you. We have some, just me again speaking, we have some what I would just call unsightly, unattractive apartment buildings. Are you saying that we need to look at not just refreshing them? That's a nice word, right? I mean, you're talking about the building in some kind of ability for an owner to takes like a low-rise apartment complex, like one of these 2 or 3 story things that just are sort of littered everywhere, and increase build something nicer, increase density kind of thing. Is that what you're saying? Build that into the? I mean, it's really density what you're talking about.
Because it's the density that's going to motivate them. I mean, they could put a lot of money in refresh and hope that they can increase the rents enough to cover the cost of renovation. But sometimes they don't necessarily have to double the size of it. I mean, some increment that would be enough of an incentive to tear down and rebuild.
It's happening in your village with I think some of the refresh of, they're mostly in my village, of the affordable housing.
by Enterprise.
That Enterprise, right? That's
Right.
I was the Erickson, but I knew it wasn't Erickson. Enterprise is
Is
doing.
that Wild Lake and
Was it Wild Lake and is it Wild Lake? Maybe it's
Harper's
not.
Choice? They're looking
It's
at
Harper's Choice. Yeah, but they're doing it.
Yeah, they're actually, I mean, because they were the ones who just got approval to increase the density through the PVP for those specific properties so that as they redevelop them, they're going to increase the density. That's right. That's
Yeah, but the difference on that and Burley Manor and what used to be Hilltop is they're 100% low income, and what you do is you give them density, you get a whole new building, et cetera. Then it's mixed use. Mixed income.
That's what they're
So, okay, that's the difference. You're turning 100% in all these projects to mixed income. The difference with the Verona, it was market rate, and the county came in and was trying to change what is market rate to 44% was the original idea, low income. That's a no-no. Instead, Tor, Grand Point, now it's Columbia Point, was going downhill, exactly what you're talking about, a huge apartment complex overlooking the lake. And they wanted to buy that, and Kittleman said no, thank God, to Carbo, as opposed to what happened before that. Now it's owned, the guy's putting $11 million in, I think he paid $47 million, he's putting $11 million in renovation. It's beautiful. I mean, everything's been changed. Private sector, so you have improved property. But the other thing would be what you're talking about is, yes, tear down the Verona, Forest Ridge, which is 100% low income, originally Copperstone. They're interested in combining with that, and on that property do a mixed use. See, but have the 108 units that you have in Forest Ridge, but get them a brand new thing. Now, I know that would take quite a bit of money, but the point is you can use the land better than the way it's being used in Oakland Mills and really reinvent our village. Maybe put some retail on the bottom. Oh, well, never mind. Okay.
I like your idea.
It's how you get flexible and maybe open space around it. You got to reinvent what we're doing now. I totally agree.
Ellen.
I just wanted to add,
Just need a
Greg,
sugar daddy.
I really get if everything is mixed use, then everything is sort of a roll of the dice, and you don't know what's going to happen. So it seemed to me that I like mixed use in terms of having, so we don't have to get in our car and drive all over the place to go things. So it would be mixed use, have to be mixed use with some kind of umbrella planning that said, sort of like this with percentages, so one could see Columbia as a mixed use community. We have percentages here and there, you take that down smaller. Yes, it's mixed use, but you can't have more than X percent retail and X percent residential and X percent, so that within that you get the mix of uses.
Yes, I guess I'm, again, just more the old school. I have no problem mixed use in the village centers and the downtown. That's to me where I think mixed use ought to be concentrated. I could agree, okay, there might be some little mixed use out by Gateway that might make some sense, but I mean, that's where my focus would be.
One last question.
All right.
We've been talking about land use and covenants, but we also need to talk about Council Bill 29 that was passed by the council that basically said how you approach doing reinventing your village centers. The process is way too cumbersome. If you have a developer that wants to do something that your community wants for your village center, it takes forever. And you need to balance the developer's needs and the consumer's needs. So one of the things we should be looking at is how Council Bill 29, which is a legislative process, could be amended to make it streamlined yet protect the
That hasn't happened yet.
What?
It hasn't happened yet, that a developer wants to do something at the village center that the community supports.
Right.
Other than that, you're right.
Well, that doesn't mean you have to duplicate meetings and have,
I agree.
That's ridiculous what's going on, and it takes forever. So we need to think about that if we really want to see changes.
Well, and I think the villages are many of them in different places. I think, Oakland Mills is ready. If it was the right proposal, I think Harper's Choice is thinking it could stand some refreshing. I don't
It's
think
already in the process.
so. if there is more support, it ought to be easier to do, or maybe there's some kind of core that's acceptable, defined for what you can do in a village center, and if you want to do anything that deviates, maybe then you go through the more elaborate process.
But Ginny's right. I mean, right now the process is used in some respects as a weapon. Okay, let's just face it, it just is. And not to get additional information. It's just to try to whack the developer over the head in some cases because they didn't comply with a particular piece of something that a proposal that people don't agree with. But I mean, I agree with that. But again, that's all.
Well, let's remember what it was before. And what it was before is that communities had no prior knowledge. There was very little input, and the input that you got was way after everything had already taken place, which is exactly what we often talk about, that we're behind the curve in terms of finding out about things. So yes, there's always modifications that can be made, but there were some reasons, there were some very clear reasons why communities needed more input. And that had to do with the behavior of developers prior to that. There were some very big fights. People didn't want to go through that kind of disruptive process. In some ways, I understand what you're saying, Ginny. What we have now works much better for the community, perhaps a little less well for the developers. So I think there's a place where we could probably find a happier medium, but we can't forget the history that goes behind it.
No, I understand that, but that you got a pendulum swing that went all the way over there. Now just bring it back to the middle and get a balance. And you can do that with a couple of amendments to Council Bill 29, which I think some council members, except it's an election year and they're going out, would agree to. But
okay, let's
we
wrap
all
this.
probably
Let's
support.
wrap this up.
Can I just challenge the board?
Yes.
My last little thought here is at the very end. You're very brave to be wanting to engage on this. Major rezonings are a lot of work, and it's complicated. And as we've just gone through, there's a lot of things people don't understand, and you're all very sophisticated in terms of knowing how Columbia works and stuff. So trying to reassure the great population here about the rezoning and whichever set of regulations you ultimately sort of settle on to support. It's going to take a lot of work with the boards of the villages and outreach generally to both the business and the residential community. So I wish you a lot of good luck with this.
Thank you.
It's a challenge, but it's important to do. We've had great 50 years, and we need another great 50 years.
So, Marcia, just one last. The sense I got was the idea of moving to districts versus the FDPs is probably a good way to go. And what the board should focus on is kind of like what these districts should be and then what the criteria, the standards are within those so that we get kind of what we want.
Well, and I think since Clarion is being engaged, basically, it's probably worth having a good conversation with them about, yes, you support districts rather than design. You are interested in design and maybe what particular parameters, and let them take a crack at drafting something so that you can respond to it. It wouldn't be possible for you guys to draft it.
Yeah, this is the page that, remember the last meeting we put up on the screen? It's page 43 of the Clarion report, where option 1, option 2 is what she's referring to.
Yes.
Right.
All right. Thank you very much, Marcia. I appreciate it.
Enjoyed
good
seeing
conversation, and have a safe trip home.
Yeah.
By the way, Sherry, could we look at the King's Contrivance restaurant because it might be R12. It might not be. It's R12. Okay, I was thinking.
So it's not Newtown.
It's not in Newtown, so it's housing. R12.
But that's
R12
a lot of
is
houses
housing.
there.
But it's not a house.
It used to be. The land, and so this gets back. So this gets back to the thing we've had. It's what the actual zoning is. It's not what's on the property. It's what could possibly happen. What could possibly happen? I hate to say it, but it's like
Yeah.
It's like, the old Guilford Road thing. Just because there was a house there
55
doesn't
plus
mean it was zoned residential. The fact it was zoned M1 is where we get into this whole problem. So here it is, Kingston Triumphs is R12. It's not even business. I mean, so in essence, they have a conditional use to use it as a restaurant, but it's residential land.
Yeah, like R20 is 2 houses per acre, R12, I don't know what that is now. Jen, what,
R20 is 2 and R12 is 3.
no, but R12 is how many houses per acre?
This is 3.
Well, it's 12,000 units, 12,000 square feet. So I just factor that in, but it's 2 about.
So, you just allow more houses.
And sure, Kingston Triumphs is not hard to find.
Pardon me? You don't have to worry about it.
The only way to find it is just randomly drive around until it shows up.
Okay.
Call Google Maps, Dick. Get yourself a
I
good
tried
phone.
that.
Get yourself a phone that
Kingston
actually
Triumphs
works.
Restaurant is
Okay.
not listed.
All right. We got the resident tracking, the board requests. You guys all have seen that. Talking points.
The board voted to direct CA's watershed manager to review the county pathway plan and provide a report on likely impacts to the watershed. The board approved IRS Form 990, and the board voted to send a letter to the county council regarding Council Bill 70, 2018, which would require the zoning council to appear at planning board hearings to support adherence to the downtown Columbia plan.
We need to be specific as to which pathway. You just said review the pathway.
Oh,
Sure.
Gonna
yeah,
be
we'll
used for
say that
future
we'll make it the
boards.
Patuxent pathway. I mean, the Patuxent Trail pathway by Old Guilford Road.
Tuxton Trail.
That's
Tuxton Branch Trail.
Patuxent Branch
Tuxton
Trail.
Branch Trail.
All right. So next we have motions for closed meetings. One tonight, one after the October work session, and one in November. Is there a motion to hold those closed meetings?
So moved.
What's the purpose listed for those, or just the?
No, I didn't. I haven't sent out the purpose. I mean, you know what the one tonight is, because we've been.
Well, can we separate them then?
Sure, we can separate
Can we
them.
separate the one tonight from the others and
Sure, we'll
vote
just
on
go
the
through
others
one.
first?
We'll go through one by one.
Okay.
Okay. So is there a motion to hold a closed meeting tonight at CA Board of Directors?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Janet.
Okay.
Janet
Okay.
second.
Sorry. I heard the voice. I just didn't. All right. Any discussion? All those in? Oh.
Yeah, if it's for what I think it's for, I think it's premature. I think we need to be dealing with that in November, and I don't think we really, we need all the board members there to be working on that. We shouldn't be doing this with not a full board, and we will be, I don't think it makes any sense to be dealing with it now.
Not all of us know what it's about, so it's hard to.
It's a letter of demand.
What is it?
Letter of demand.
Letter of instruction.
What?
Remember the letter of instruction letter? I mean, it's the one. Remember?
We're also going to talk about minutes tonight, aren't we?
Yes.
Oh no, just the release.
Well, that's what I
With the
mean.
release, yeah. But I can do that at any of the closed
Closed
meetings.
meeting, well, we decide we do it at the next closed
Yeah,
meeting.
right. Yeah. The real topic of tonight is the letter. I mean,
That's the only topic for tonight.
yeah.
Yeah, I'm
Yeah, there's
saying,
some
I think
housekeeping.
Lynn sent her email around on that, Lynn Egan, but she's out of town, that she thinks it should wait, and I totally agree with what Lynn's saying. It should wait until whenever the November meeting is with the facilitator. And we're missing 2 board members. I don't think it's appropriate to be trying to deal with that tonight.
Any other discussion?
Well, I'd like to know what Greg thinks about that.
What?
Dick asked.
Okay, good night.
Good night. Good night,
Everybody.
Chow.
Oh, hold on.
Chow could be part of the vote.
He can be part of the vote.
You just said good night.
Okay, I vote yes.
We're voting on whether to have a closed meeting, Joe.
Yes. You guys can have a closed meeting until 12 o'clock.
Chow decided we're going to have a closed meeting.
Okay.
How are you going to get here? The purpose of the closed meeting is to deal with that letter, and I don't think that's appropriate tonight. You're really missing, and Lynn's missing, and
Or Dick asked Greg a question.
What did you ask me, Dick?
But you know what the subject of the meeting is. I was wondering how you felt about delaying it.
Oh, I don't want to delay it. We can delay a vote on a letter of instruction, but I would like to at least start the discussion on it tonight.
Okay, any further discussion? All those in favor then of the closed meeting? Okay, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6.
Say the names, please, for the
Oh, yeah, I will. Janet, Alan, Greg, Sherry, Nancy, Dick. I'm going to get right on. No, I'm going to oppose. Jenny, I'll oppose too. All right, so that passes. Okay, now is there a motion to hold a closed meeting on October 11th? That one is a topic that Milton is going to bring to the board. And I'll let you know more as soon as things.
Second.
Well, then no. How can we vote on whether to have a closed meeting we don't know what it's on?
Did Nancy second?
So Jenny moved and Nancy seconded. Any discussion?
Yeah. We don't know the subject of it. I don't understand how we can, at least a general something.
Can we vote on that at the closed meeting tonight?
It has to do with legislation.
Yeah, it has
That's
to do
really
with
all I can
legislation.
say.
I've not had a closed meeting that wasn't important.
All right, yeah, and so as Sherry said, it does involve legislation. It's an issue that Milton wants the board to address.
So it's a legal matter, right? Because
It is
legislation is not
illegal.
in the act,
It
right?
is.
So what's in the act that's going to have to do with legal advice on?
It is legal advice on legislation.
Yeah. All right. Any further discussion? All those in favor? Looks like unanimous. Okay, and then last one is a motion to close the meeting in November, and that's Milton's midterm evaluation. That's our usual.
So moved.
Second.
Ginny moved and Nancy seconded. Any discussion? All those in favor? It's like unanimous. Okay.
Yes.
All right. Thank you. I will adjourn the open meeting. We'll move to the closed meeting.